Good evening, Internet. It is a bit of a change tonight. So we did have our regular episode planned for tonight. However, there's been some late developments, shall we say, with the cast and crew. So Samal, unfortunately, has been stuck at work, which means he's not going to be here tonight. And unfortunately, our resident rogue bard, Ander, played by Danny, has unfortunately fallen ill. So we are down to just a two-man party tonight. So we thought, and we've been discussing it for a while, that we would mix things up a little bit tonight. So we're actually going to do our mid-season recap and go through basically what's happened for the first 62 episodes of our live stream. And we'll get to that shortly. But I suppose I will still do my regular shout-outs just to the tools we use during these streams. Not necessarily the streams that we're going to be, or the stuff we're going to be doing today, but through all the episodes anyway. Since we're doing a mid-season recap, it would be remiss of me not to thank those tools that we have used during that time. So a huge shout-out to the tools such as Owlbear Rodeo, Incarnate, Hero Forge, D&D Beyond, Tabletop Audio. What else? Kassoon, 5e Magic Shop, some Patreon services that I use. A huge shout out to Kobold Press for some of the extra materials as well that we've used in terms of books. So for monsters and character options and traps and all sorts. And of course, an absolutely massive shout out to Battle Bards. I have been reviewing or re-listening, I should say, to all of our podcasts recently, and if the sound effects don't come across as well on stream, they massively do in the podcast. They're amazing to hear in the podcast. So please go and check BattleBards out if you wish to get your own sound effects in your own game. Then, of course, you can use the code you see on screen, Malt and Magic, when you register, and that will get yourselves a nice cheeky discount. I've already mentioned the podcast, but please do go check that out as well. If you can't get enough of Malt and Magic in your life and you just want that little bit more, then go and re-listen to all of our past episodes, including this recap if you like, which we will put out on podcast networks. So on your podcast platform of choice, you can go listen to Malt and Magic, any of the past episodes. And yeah, if you get a chance and you are able, please leave us a like or a review or a subscription, follow, those sorts of things. Anything you can do to help us get the word out is amazing. Don't forget to check out all the past videos and all the past episodes and the original recap as well on YouTube. That's where you can find pretty much all of our historical videos, including the one-shots, one of which we ran very recently and was very successful. So don't forget to check those out. Also, if you're heading to YouTube, you may as well check out Tales of Tielnar as well, which is our sister stream. I'm still calling it that, even though they've got nothing to do with us apart from having the same, or one player and one DM, the same. So Samal is the Dungeon Master for that stream. It is fantastic. Very exciting, very wacky, very crazy. Great bunch of players, some of whom are very good fans of ours as well. So please go check them out on YouTube as well and show them some love and support as much as you show us. And I suppose that's about it. Social media, don't forget to check the social media. Obviously we posted our updates on that earlier about this turning into our mid-season recap. So yes, I suppose with that there probably won't be as much adult humour tonight. There's still going to be some, and there'll certainly still be some adult language. Yeah, let's roll. Hello. What a lonely, lonely screen this feels like.
It feels very, very weird. Very weird indeed.
But we are here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we will do the lineup. It's going to be a very small lineup today, but we'll do it. So I am the Dungeon Master for Malt and Magic. I play the psychic character of Bothrid as well, and of course all the NPCs.
And I'm Dave. I play Dargon the Goliath Fighter Warlock.
Absolutely, and there's some things already to cover as part of that, I suppose, as we go through the recap. But yeah, so tonight is very much just... it's a chance for Dave and I to sort of discuss what's happened so far, sort of go over the events that we've gone through, because we've gone through a hell of a lot in 62 episodes, actually. And this is going to take us, this recap, pretty much straight from the very first recorded stream up to last week's episode 62. Anything before that, we've already done a recap for, and you can find that on YouTube, so please go check that out. But hopefully, if anybody is now sort of joining us midway through the campaign, this will give them an opportunity to catch up and understand what's going on, so they don't have to sort of go back, and if they don't want to, they don't have to go back through all the past episodes just to watch us live. Right now, they can watch us live and then revisit that stuff later if they want to. So, for anybody that is joining us in the chat and on the stream, feel free to drop your questions. If you've already seen some things during the stream and you're sort of, why did you do that? Or what does this mean? How does this potentially have a knock-on effect? Those sorts of things. I will answer what I can. Obviously, some things will affect the plot going forward. Those things I will probably keep under my metaphorical hat, shall we speak.
I did have a huge number of questions, and I was like, right, I want to know this, and oh, no, we can't know that yet.
Yeah, it's not going to work that way, unfortunately, mate. So, who is the big bad guy for the campaign? Yeah,
do you know what? It wasn't even that. And actually, I tell you what, to just jump out of order for a second, I think it was like, one of the more recent, things that we've seen. I wanted to ask about someone and going, oh no, they may come back up, and I believe it was, where is Feltag?
So, funnily enough, because I have just redone the. As I've been listening to sort of the podcasts, I go back and redo Hero Forge character creations and stuff like that. And I think I'm up to the point where it's the bit with the airship, actually, and we will cover back where this comes from and where we've got to as part of the stream. But yeah, so I then went back and thought, do you know what, the design I've done for Feltag right now does not match up. So I've created more of a pirate look and feel for him, as that's what he was, or a sailor, prior to getting lost in Moonbright, or getting abandoned in Moonbright, we should say.
He fell asleep, all right? We forgot about him. But yeah, he switched off and we forgot about him. He needs to have some sort of ping or something, email, anything.
Yeah, there needs to be like an Apple tile attached to him or something like that. Those sorts of things. I mean, so let's take it right back to episode 1, Malt and Magic. And we were right in the middle of I suppose we just kicked off what I've termed the Ironforge arc. So the journey from Seameat to Greenflower, and we've started in the midst of Greenflower. Actually, you'd already gone down the well in Greenflower, and had just sort of tackled the beast that was down there, and then came up to this just whole mess of activity, really. And that's when we introduced Samau's character.
Yeah, you may have already covered this then, but what was the this was pre-stream. If you can remind us what creature we went up against, a devil or demon or something? Was that actually connected to Theogodin loosely, or was that just random?
the fiend that you faced was. Do you know what? I can't remember the name of the thing now. I'm going to have to... I think it was a Glabrezu. I think it's how it's pronounced. So I'll just do my quick check on D&D Beyond to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. But yes, linked to Theogodin and sort of everything that was going on around him, absolutely. There's probably a few more details in there which we've not covered yet, but we will certainly get there. So yeah, that's when you went down the well. You found, obviously, the skeleton of an older creature, which I'm actually not going to talk about, because that particular creature may reappear at some point in the future campaign.
Yeah, so I was going to say that there was the skeleton of the older creature that was killed by this fiend that we killed. Also, there was was it Onyx Skull?
Yes, there was an Onyx Skull.
Now, I believe that that was lost in the bag of holding.
It was indeed.
So, can we know what that was yet? it was hidden by a trap. We sprang that trap and got hurt, but made it out.
So what I'm going to say about the Onyx Skull is, I'm not going to tell you what it is or how it relates. What I am going to tell you is that it still exists.
Okay.
So it was one of the items with that particular card from the Deck of Many Things. It specifies that certain items just disappear or disintegrate or are gone forever. Other items just disappear and reappear in another location.
Okay.
So that skull itself is still out in the world to be found and understood. Doesn't necessarily mean anything critical to our campaign right now. Could do, might not. But yeah, it's I suppose it's a bit of a MacGuffin, if you like. So
Okay.
it may play more into the wider lore of the world that we're slowly building, wider than Nylin. Because obviously that's something we've been doing slowly as well throughout the campaign, is actually talking about things that are outside Nylin and the places we've come from.
Yeah.
Because we started this whole thing, to be honest, we started it in the Forgotten Realms, and we've retconned that to be these places that we no longer have access to as part of being in Nylin now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting building in the backgrounds where we came from without really knowing, how that actually fits in and whether we'll ever see that. And obviously, we still don't know, but it's good fun to still be here in Nylin.
Absolutely. And there's still a lot to do in Nylin, let's be fair. There's a lot of places we still haven't visited yet. There's still a lot of lore to dig into, and I create more lore every week, so don't worry about that. But yeah, so I suppose the Ironforge arc, there was a lot that happened, but I suppose the real critical pieces were getting to Ironforge in the first place. There were some scuffles. There was the introduction of Kirik, and the trust that had to be built up, actually, between the party and Kirik, going forward from Seameat and his actions at... going forward from Greenflower and his actions at Greenflower certainly gave him a good grounding within the group. But I think then it was really that arc which allowed Kirik to cement himself as part of the group as well as he went into Hero Forge. Go check out Hero Forge for your mini creation; they're fantastic. As you went over to Ironforge, found Timiel the Damned, which was the key plot point for actually Ironforge, was the fact that it was the jail cell, if you like, for the fallen angel Timiel. You sort of understood more about his story as we've gone along, and obviously he is now Dargon's patron, more importantly.
Yeah, thoroughly wasn't expecting that or anticipating that, and for those who have also seen the start and those who haven't, of course it was a really interesting one to look back for me. Is getting into Ironforge for Dargon was interesting because it really did lend itself to he was a big fighting brute, and that was a very interesting time because he was starting to consider the help of the gods. Didn't really know who, but was willing to accept it, going, I'm out of my comfort zone here. I think it's worked really well that he's become a warlock instead of anything else because of that that sort of connection of I'm still fighting, I'm not like, I'm no cleric. So that was interesting, but also the fact that in the discussion with the I want to say Sphinx.
Yes.
He
was a Sphinx.
He immediately chose initially to go with a strength-based challenge, then was questioned on it, which was just a confirmation. You sure you're happy to go with that? That wasn't like leading or anything. And he flipped and went, no, religion. And he probably would have failed on both. Because I know that they were meant to be particularly hard. But that was just such an interesting turning point in him not staying a fighter. And I think has done, great swathes in making him more than just a fighter. And it's been very interesting.
Absolutely. I think that particular puzzle sequence, if you like, was designed in such a way that whoever went to the door had the choice of those three puzzles as well. I think it was strength and acrobatics, dexterity based check, or even a charisma based skill challenge, and then the religion based skill challenge. kind of designed around the 3 characters, but of course there's then that flexibility. And with Dargon in the place he was in, which was that I'm considering the gods, it's kind of that opportunity for him to go, can I reach out to the gods? Can they help me? And ultimately Dargon did fail, but it then opened the channel to Paylor. Quite obviously why it was Paylor at the time, or quite obviously now, I suppose, why it was Paylor.
I was going to say,
given who's
again,
in Ironforge.
If I remember correctly, I think it might have been the boat trip back that finally made it go, that's who you've been talking to. So even then, still didn't know.
Yeah. So yeah, there was some subtle hints, and I think the imagery around the floor for that particular puzzle with the various different symbols, and there were symbols of the Raven Queen, there were symbols to Moradin, Paylor, most of the deities from the base pantheon that we worked from at the time, which is the pantheon from Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. Although we've bolted on a few more since then, or as I've been working with the world a little bit more, because let's be fair, this is still my first DM campaign, first time DMing, it's the first campaign I've sort of created. So there's a few things that we're slowly building on into the story, but that was not only an important sort of sequence for the story itself, going through Ironforge, completing that skill challenge, finding Timiel, finding the second prophecy, the second piece of the prophecy, but as I say, a really, really important part for Dargon himself in terms of his character development and those turning points. And then as we leave Ironforge, it's really the first proper encounter we have with the Eladrin. Yes, with the Dark Eladrin.
And also, we probably should also mention that this was also around the time that Ander got his sword, which again, I'm intrigued to know whether you intended him to be the one to lift it, or whether
it was one of those mechanics. It was there to be taken. I think with a lot of these things, I've just dropped them in there, and I've always known in my heart of hearts, I know who is going to pick this up at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I know who is going to end up having this, and there's other items which are fairly obvious if we think about them. But actually the sword, I'd already placed it there, already knew it was going to be there, already knew what it was going to do. And as you're going through it was through the mountain pass after you'd been attacked by the Harpies. As you were going through there, I just remember thinking, it's going to be Ander who picks this sword up.
Yeah.
It's going to be Ander who's got to deal with this. But of course, it didn't really have any effects up until 5-6 episodes later, really.
Yeah. So I mean, there was the minor encounter with him walking away from a camp. Then the first real time we properly saw it take fold was him not knowing what to do in the fight out of Ironforge, and could have potentially led on to him having a bad day and therefore shooting after Theogodon in the upcoming arrival there. So that's really when we started to see it. But as you say, it took a while for us to really trigger what was wrong with it.
Absolutely. And you've reminded me of a very valid point there around the sword, because that itself represented a key story arc around Ander, while the rest of the story is all going on. Ander and the sword represents its own very interesting dynamic, if you like, that is still continuing in our campaign today, knowing where the sword has now ended up, because it's gone from Ander to the Malt Masters, and now the Stillman has effectively taken it and used it and got it to its supposed full potential.
Not only that, but for Ander itself, it had consequences. Those consequences we've talked about in Malt Magic and more, in the fact that he went down the College of Eloquence, and he was going to go down College of Swords. He had a bad time with a sword. That changed it. Now, what I'm really impressed with is that Danny didn't go, but I want to do College of Swords. He went, it doesn't make sense. So, kudos to him for going, no, actually I'm going to go down a different route. I also think they're all brilliant directions, so, you couldn't really pick a bad one, but it was still good to see that he didn't just try and, crowbar it in. He was like, no, that's a decent direction change, that.
Yeah, and I think just generally across all 62 episodes we've done now, the role-playing from you guys has just gone. I mean, it was already good at the start, but it's just phenomenal now. It's like a Dungeon Master's dream. There's absolutely zero judgment at our table, virtual table. We all just love that. And sometimes role-playing episodes can feel as a DM a little bit like, especially when you're live streaming, a little bit like, is this entertaining enough for the people that aren't participating in the game?
Yeah.
But the more I listen to it, listen back to it, and I've got a bias view anyway. But hearing those moments where you guys just are fully in character and fully engaged in the character, and you're no longer Dave, you are Dargon, and this is what Dargon would do.
Yeah.
Love those moments.
And sometimes we do, I wouldn't say break fourth wall. We kind of, I do like sometimes in game to go, right, guys, I know this, but my character doesn't. So here's my response, because sometimes It's so obvious as to why he was like, why aren't you doing that? But and sometimes we go through that in Malt Magic and More. Other times we go through it and actually go, do you know what? I'm just going to say it now, just to clarify why the hell I'm doing this.
But it's absolutely right, and I think generally the character developments through. I mean, you've all had some serious character arcs during this whole campaign so far, and I say we're only 62 episodes in. That's one hell of a campaign already. We could end it here, and I'd be, okay, we've done a lot, we've achieved a lot. It's amazing. But yeah, I suppose it all really started at Ironforge. That was the core of really where the campaign really kicked off. We'd done a few bits before then with Telma and the prophecies and the whole Mark Masters thing, but that was really when you started to get into the heart of this world and what's going on. I suppose once we'd gone through that and seen Theogodin, the Dark Eladrin, encountered him for the first time, realised how much of a bad guy this guy was, but powerful individual this guy was as well. It changed the dynamic and changed the flow of the group and what the plans were, I think.
Did he level up as we did? So, or was he the same level when we met him back then as he was when we met him then again later?
Believe it or not, I actually levelled Theogodin down.
Oh, okay.
So I'd created way before, and in fact he'd levelled down before you even got to Ironforge. I'd created him as an actual level 20, thinking this guy's going to be a very big bad. And then about 2 episodes into our story, went, no, that's not happening. He's actually going to be more of a lackey, because I needed that introduction to actually, there's agents out there, there's champions much like yourselves, fighting for the other side.
Yes.
And that's kind of the way the story, and you probably got from last week with some of the snippets around how the champions element is starting to come into play now.
Yes.
But yeah, he was, I should say, the agent for whatever this dark force is that's now attempting to take over Nihilin.
Whose name is?
But at you can try and catch me out like that. But that's at that time, he was the big bad. He was the enemy that was chasing you, that was trying to get hold of these things that you were actively seeking as well. And let's face it, that fight was only ever going to go one way.
Absolutely. Now, saying that, it looked like we got him down to hurting him, but then he still had some big cards up his sleeve. If I understand, so we actually did hurt him a lot, but I don't know what he did to then sort of recover it, but we got a lot worse a lot quicker at a time when he was vulnerable, and obviously that meant that we had to go, which was a very, very interesting exit sequence certainly for Dargon, and yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to take my glasses off because I realise I'm just twitching every now and again, trying to shove them back up my nose.
I'm doing it all the time.
So we don't want to be twitching on stream. Oh, I suppose twitching on Twitch.
Twitching on Twitch.
Yeah.
Why not?
Anyway, pun. I suppose that should be like anti-inspiration for the DM for making really bad puns.
Oh, that's the inspiration for all three of us. That's good. Lovely. Right,
well,
you heard it here first, folks.
To be fair, I think I've been a bit, because that's the other thing going through this is my journey as a dungeon master, and I just keep forgetting things like inspiration and stuff like that. So it's only now recently I've just been like, okay, when they do things like that, grant them the gift.
I have to say, yes, I did notice over the last couple of weeks. I am very grateful. I think I don't think it's game breaking at all, because it's usually only ever one role. Yes, that can be a very crucial role, but that's the point of it. And yeah, I do love that we do get that feedback. That, because we're all here to just have fun anyway. We're not here to seek those inspiration points or anything else, but it's great when we do get it, and especially useful at times. So very nice.
And that's my aim at the end of the day. And there's rules we always bugger up. There's still rules that I figure out, but at the end of the day, we are having fun. So D&D gives us that flexibility, which is why I love this game so much. So yeah, Ironforge was one hell of an arc, really, and a lot happened. I think they are the main points. I don't think we've missed anything off there.
If you
the beginning of Bothrid coming
with,
into his Druidic as well.
Yeah, but if you include also us leaving Ironforge, leaving the island, then again it really showed us home how. Well, there's the first time that we actually had to leave a place we couldn't save. That failure is an option, and also to a degree of us just wandering around and having a lovely time and going to Moonbright, and this was a pre-stream, but we were, it was like, yes, this is fine, to obviously then go, no, it's not. Nylin, that was our first sign of Nylin is crumbling, and that really kicked us into gear to go, hang on a minute, we've got to pay attention.
Absolutely, and I think that's the sort of having not only failed with Theogodin, but they're going back to Greenflower and sort of realising nobody's there now. It's become a bit of a ghost town, and quite literally zombies start crawling their way up out of the ground to the point where it is mass retreat out of this village that you'd thought you'd saved, and turns out no. Whatever magic had permeated the ground had well and truly permeated the ground to the point where it was corrupting the dead, bringing them back to life. And that itself was the beginning of really something for Kirik's character, actually, for Samel's character of Kirik, around the I am a cleric, but I am a grave cleric, and this is not okay for me. I do not want to leave this place. And you could see during that episode, Kirik sort of, no, I don't want to go. I want to fight all these zombies if it's the last thing I do. This is not right. This is against the natural balance of the world.
Yeah.
And that's slowly and surely becoming a reoccurring theme with Kirik, which I really, really love.
It is very good indeed. I take it that rooted evil that was there was something he missed in a later episode. And I say missed because there was the one particular role that meant that he didn't notice something. I take it that was what reoccurred not long ago when he returned to Greenflower.
Yeah, we're talking about the mega moment where Kirik just decided to use one of the new abilities I'd gifted him and just straight back to Greenflower, and it sort of takes me out to that point around this was deep rooted in Kirik right from that episode. There is still something that he's missed in Greenflower. You are correct. That will probably have another part to play if he goes back, or depending on what happens.
Can we also know what Vraco's journey was in terms of his venture to Greenflower?
Absolutely. So, because Vraco's had in the background one hell of a journey. It's a shame we didn't really do some of these sort of prologues and epilogues a little bit further back in the stream. Obviously a mechanic I nicked from Abrir Irongar. Thank you very much for introducing that into the world of D&D, because that's amazing.
Absolutely stunning.
But so Vraco was originally tasked to go and see what was going on at Greenflower. You'd obviously reported back that it was now just this cascade of zombies now in there. So Vraco was sent back to try and figure out how to fix that. Vraco himself not much more powerful than yourselves at that time, so he also had to make a retreat, but he had the benefit of using the Malt Master's network, if you like, and being able to use things like teleport and those sorts of things. So he did manage to get back, and I think skipping over a few things, and we'll come back to some of the other plot points around the characters and in the arcs themselves, but Vraco's story very much goes from Greenflower to meeting you guys back at back at Glentuag. Forgot the name of my own bloody town there. But then his journey from there to some of the stuff he'd sort of done way back in the past with the Malt Masters around the vampires and being sent to the Shadowfell, and actually, because they're vampires and are undead, he's a cleric. You can, fuck, I'm going to literally take you out. I do not agree with the way you are or what you are. Very close-minded from Vraco there, so he actually ends up killing their leader, which pushes them out of the Shadowfell where they're comfortable and where they live, which is why they're then up in the Isle of the Dead, which I think we'd pretty much figured out anyway. But that is a defining moment in Vraco's past, so that when he goes to Greenflower and then back to the Malt Masters Guild and to the ruins of Ixalan to try and understand where you guys have gone, because that was his next mission, is we've lost contact with our acolytes, with the Wardens of the Vale as they are now known, but weren't known back then. Just the adventurers that we'd brought into this world, where have they gone? So Vraco then went to find you, and it was then, as he came out of there, with the sheer power of necrotic energy, if you like, within that place at the time, due to the rituals that were going on, and again, we'll come back to what that is in a second. Vampires are actually drawn there. Found Vraco, and that's why they took him. So it was more a note of coincidence than anything else, and that obviously started the downfall of Vraco. They took him away and they actually turn him to the one thing that he hates. Becomes an undead, not a revenant, but actually a thrall of sorts. As part of then the wacky journey back from the Isle of the Dead, he gets zapped into the Feywild. And the first thing the Eladrin within the Feywild think to do is actually we need to just lock him up. There's very few ways for us to kill him here, so we just need to lock him up. And it was up to the party to then go and rescue him, but that was pretty much it for Vraco. The minute he landed on the Isle of the Dead, he was gone.
It was it was a very interesting one there. And of course that was also maybe jumping ahead, so we'll come to that one later, but yes, that was also a very interesting episode to escape, so that was also very good fun.
I suppose it's we will get to those points, but I suppose because the next point in the arc after Ironforge was then after that Greenflower piece, there was the journey back across the ocean with the Kraken, which was all a bit of fun and just introduced a bit of an interim flavour with no real character defining moments, if you like, no real plot heaviness, just breaks up those this is really intense moments. Just let's just throw a fun monster at you, and it was only a juvenile Kraken, I will point out. It was not a full-blooded Kraken. So there's some more fun to potentially be had there with Krakens, but then landing back in Seameat and the first introduction of the Serpent's Cloak, although you didn't know what they were back then. And exploring the lighthouse and understanding that Abaya, the leader of that lighthouse, had gone missing. The lighthouse had basically been ransacked by this elven guard, or bunch of elven warriors. Is the journey then through the lighthouse?
I take it that's still sort of a subplot that's still running, if that makes sense.
Well, Abaya is still missing. You guys still don't know where Abaya is, and I'm going to sneeze in a minute, so I apologise for that in a second, because I can feel it building. It was really the introduction of that Thieves Guild, if you like. There we go. I knew it was coming. Apologies, viewers. At least it wasn't into the mic. Christ. Air pressure changed in the room there. But it was my introduction of the Thieves Guild. Andrew had kind of met them previously in Seameat when the kid had nicked all your stuff and then taken it to the lighthouse, and you got retrieved it, and Ander met a buyer there. It's then okay, what's in this lighthouse? Where is a buyer? I've made those friends, and obviously the Tabaxi in Seameat at the same time, introducing another important minor subplot around the fact they'd been kicked out of their previous home, and they are tribal by nature. But they had wandered a certain desert at the time. It's the Arcane Wastes, to the west of Nylin, which we know is where the Black City is, and you guys have drawn your own confusions there. That's probably more accurate. Drawn your own conclusions there as to what's going on. But this was sort of Anders' story, not just around the Thieves Guild, but also around the sword. Because it's really then that the sword started to play tricks, and it was during that journey back that the sword had really started to root itself in Anders' mind and change the way Anders was acting and who he was, and affect his psyche in that little bit.
I think it was quite recently that we heard something, and I mean that by Samau and I, because we obviously, we did as we were told. We took our headphones off when we needed to. So, the viewers were aware of this, but, even in the point of editing at that time, because I was editing the videos, instead of just cutting ends off, which is what we do now, I didn't listen to it because I didn't want to spoil it. And that was what was even more fun, and it was only, a couple of months ago, he just chimes out in Malt, Magic and More that his full intention was to go and kill the leader of the Tabaxi. And I was like, excuse me, what? I was astonishing because, really didn't know how far that sword had really taken effect. And it was due to the fact that we had taken our headphones off. We didn't know this was going on. We knew something. We were like, oh, bad sword, We didn't know what it was doing. And I loved that as a player.
Yeah, it was that moment when I think you'd sent him ahead to scout into the camp, and he'd gone invisible, and he'd snuck into the tent and sort of...
he woke up early and just decided to go in, and that was nothing that we knew of. And again, we were listening to the fact that he was doing this, but he never said why he was doing it. And the fact that only because he nearly got caught did he leave. It was I say, months later, then he mentioned the fact that his full intention was to go and kill someone. I was like,
and that was absolutely sort of those changes that the sword was really making to Ander.
Yeah.
And Danny did that fantastically, to be fair. The things that were going on, like even the stuff that I didn't realise at the time, and you sort of listen to it back and think, Jesus, how well he did at hiding a lot of those moments, even from me as a DM, but obviously from the group in those sort of quiet moments. But we then provided him with a way to get out, and he did so in the most spectacular fashion I think I couldn't have ever imagined.
It was amazing.
So he gets poisoned by this still unidentified poison from the Serpent's Cloak chest, which was actually the final doorway down into the underground sewer tunnels, which I think we kind of understood were a way for the thieves to get around without walking around in broad daylight.
Yeah.
And that poison not only did a lot of damage, but just started to slowly kill him, and that seems to be another reoccurring theme within the Forgotten Kingdom of Nylon, is Ander contracting diseases or picking up things that just slowly kill him over time. Still survived, luckily.
Yeah.
But this first one did kill him, to be fair.
Yeah.
Or rather, he killed himself.
Yeah.
So there's that moment where the Tabaxi healing in, because the lighthouse itself, yeah, there was some treasure in there, and it was a journey through to try and understand what was going on and what the Serpent's Cloak were, even though you didn't know the name of them at that time, who the elves were that were attacking them, and where that whole story is coming from. But ultimately it was about Ander the sword, and then Ander dying by choosing in his mind's eye to stab himself with the sword.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tried to cut his own hand off, didn't work. And then tried to take the hand off that was holding the sword, that was never going to work. And then just stabbed himself with the sword and cut that connection off, and that presented that moment for you and Kirik to sort of step in, and Kirik especially, to sort of remove curse, and the sword itself falling lifeless. Inert is probably the right word, on the floor.
Which is also another good thing, because for all intents and purposes, to Dargon, it was therefore done. Over with. It's just a sword.
Mm-hmm.
And especially even after the discussions of what do you do, remove curse, okay, good, that's it, that thing is now a sword. And obviously to see that it wasn't was also awesome. It was then Simao and Kirik who, because Dargon kept the sword. Yep.
Dargon put the sword in his bag of holding.
Yep.
And Kirik one night while Dargon is sleeping, during his watch, takes the sword.
Yeah.
Like, inspects the sword, casts, I think it was cast Identify, or casts something on the sword. Maybe even tried a Legend Lore.
Was it Legend Lore? Might have been Legend Lore in the
I think it was
house.
Legend, might have been Legend Lore. And failed, I might add. Didn't get the information.
Yeah.
But then put it in his bag of holding, or his handy haversack that he's got. So the sword has actually passed through all three of you, but only one has fallen or succumbed to the power of the sword, if you like.
Yeah.
Bothrid has yet to touch the sword, which is probably the wisest decision anybody has ever made. Because Bothrid, with that sword in hand when he's raging, not a good thing.
No. That would have been bad. That would have been bad indeed. So, would we have been able to follow those tunnels?
Yes.
Yeah?
And those tunnels still exist.
Yeah. So, as I say, they're
So,
therefore...
quite simply put...
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
now,
at some point, if you...
Yeah, we really couldn't... I think there was a little bit of confusion as to whether they went sort of towards the sea or away from the sea, but I believe that they went away from the sea and we could have followed them that way.
That particular tunnel may have.
So, yeah, there could have been many more, which we didn't see, which was...
Could have been many more.
Very interesting. And yeah, yeah, would be great fun to be able to revisit so many things that obviously we've done. But yeah, that would definitely be one. I'm also really curious to know, jumping ahead now, whether Seameat is still there, still fighting off, or whether it has also, succumbs to being so close to Moonbright. But again, stuff that we would love to know in the future, and I'm sure will come up. So.
Well, absolutely. I think we've started to see very recently around, and we are jumping ahead massively. After the fall of Moonbright, we've now started to see with some of those epilogues and prologue pieces around how that seems to be spreading.
Yep.
And I suppose you could argue that actually you've already lost part of Nylin in Greenflower.
Yeah.
The Isle of the Dead already exists the way it is.
Yeah.
And now we've got Moonbright, which is in the way it is. It looks like there are creatures or some kind of attacking force heading towards River's End and Deluin in that way. Who knows what's going to happen there? Well, I do, but we'll see what happens as part of the plot. So yeah, there's a lot that happened since, and I think the arcs have got a lot more involved as we've moved along. We've done Ironforge, we did Seameat and the Lighthouse and the Sword, and Ander more importantly, and then it was again the journey home. There were some great shopping episodes in the middle of there, and the interactions with Mephisto, which is fantastic. It's just some brilliant little cracking moments that happen.
Yeah, so of course we took a ship back into the lock, didn't we?
We did.
To get us back. So that was why I was like, I kept thinking, did we get through Moonbright? But we didn't. We actually wanted to get there quicker.
Ship, which was helmed by Captain William Pegbag. Yeah, you actually navigated across the northern sort of edge of Loch Essamere and then stopped so far away from Sorrow's Falls, which is where you told Captain Swift and the crew of the Winter's Tale to go. And Captain William's ship is actually the Summer's End. So there is a common theme through the ships that I've created here. But yeah, so they only went so far. But there was never really the amicable nature between the Wardens and the crew of the Summer's End that there was between sort of the Winter's Tale and the Wardens. That was tested at times, obviously. But yeah, ultimately you've interacted with characters that you know are inherently your allies. You've also interacted with quite a few who you have no idea whether they're friend, foe, ambivalent, whether they have any important sort of moments to contribute to the story of Nylin.
Yeah, pre-stream I think we spoke to, you'll tell me whether it was 3 or 4 captains to get us over to get the island and Greenflower, so 3. So 3. We know we know 2 by we've been on both 2 ships. One we're intimately acquainted with. The one, as you say, have given us passage. The other one, no idea. And it'll be very interesting whether that's the case. Now, I say no idea, but am I also to understand that we got possibly even the last episode or the one before notification of the fact that one of those ships was heading towards River's End?
Yes.
Again, my memory fails me because it's late at night when we hear these things, but I believe that one of them is the one heading that way.
Yes, absolutely.
I
so
also can't remember exactly whether it was good or bad of the people on it, but again, that was something that will be in that episode.
It wasn't really revealed, but obviously it's Captain Swift and Bralin that were up there looking out.
Yes.
So sort of captain and first mate of the Winter's Tale, who were looking out and see that ship, which had Dargon, Kirik and Ander been there, they would have recognised that ship. And we won't get into that right now because it's literally just happened, and there's lots to there's a story to be told there. But they absolutely would recognise that ship and be able to understand who is potentially on that ship and sort of what's going on there. So it's interesting. There's all these little threads that are now starting to find their way
properly bring
the story.
Themselves in. Yeah, it's really interesting. So of course we get back to Glentuag.
Yes.
And we just trying to remember, was that when it started getting particularly cold?
It's exactly when it started to get particularly cold and the winter had seemed to set in early. There was a brief Halloween moment in there between sort of all of this happening.
Of course.
As you went back into the lighthouse and finally got downstairs to where those tunnels were. But that, again, was just a bit of fun to throw in during the Halloween. Almost a little bit of a one-shot, but a side story. Gives me a chance to play around with the story of Sleepy Hollow again, which I always love. But yeah, so then getting back to Glentuag, it is bitterly, bitterly cold. And Dargon doesn't feel it as much as the others, but there's snow on the ground, and this is there shouldn't be any snow at this time of year just yet. Yes, it's coming, it's on the horizon, but at this point it is a lot colder than it usually ever would be as well. And you sort of have your discussions with the Malt Masters. Kirik actually at this point reveals he's got the sword and hands it over to the Malt Masters. And you discuss with the Malt Masters around various things. They kind of invite you more into the fold at this point, recognising you all a little bit more as allies and heroes, more importantly.
That may have also been the first time, because we were heading back to the Malt Masters, the first time Kirik had met them, and the first inkling, the little nugget that we had maybe been like the characters thought they were being played slightly for fools. They'd been sent on a journey they were woefully unprepared for, and of course making their way back going, something's amiss. Now obviously we will get into it later as well each time it happens, but that was the first time we had an inkling that something wasn't quite right. It got worse from there, but this was the first time where we weren't quite thoroughly happy about our connection or relationship with them.
Absolutely, and it was something I really had a lot of fun with, I'm going to say, actually, is introducing this idea that, okay, you've been brought here by people. They've got no reason to really trust you other than the fact that you were proving yourselves thus far. And on the flip side, you've got no reason to trust them. They've ripped you out of your current lives and placed you in this place. So yes, it was interesting to introduce that dynamic of who do we trust in this kingdom, this land, which is a shitstorm of mess, to be honest. It's just total crazy stuff going on. There's no real leaders anywhere. There's no direct lines of rulership or leadership. There's no real clear sort of outstanding deities or anything like that. It's just this mess of chaos going on.
Just out of interest on that, has it ever been enlightened towards us as to whether the Malt Masters brought us, whether the Seer brought us, or whether the Malt Masters brought us on the Seer's advising, or something different?
So you guys know that the Malt Masters brought you here?
Yeah.
Because the first time you landed was in Glentuag itself. They brought you there.
Which we were aware of, but still, were they simply our receivers? You know, that was...
Yeah, so why or how,
Yeah.
you don't know yet.
Yeah.
Because that whole... I mean, you've been told that Nylon itself exists outside time and space and is in its own sort of pocket universe, pocket dimension, if you like. But that the walls between that universe or that pocket dimension and the rest of the world, Ariadale, I'm happy to pronounce that is the name of the world that we are living in, or playing in, I should say. Indeed, you heard it here first, Ariadale. And I have designed the full world map as well. Like, the whole thing is done, which is cool. So yeah, you've been pulled out of that world. The barriers between Nylin and Ariadale are now growing thinner, and you've started to understand why that is as well, and understood a bit more around the story behind what happened to Nylin. Over time, you've sort of been pulling out the snippets. You got a lot from Timiel. Understood, obviously, that Timiel was the one that dealt that final blow to the last brother, if you like, and it was the last brother who then was granted a last opportunity by the gods at the time in the form of a wish. What do you want in this moment? How can we save Nylin? And actually the brother chose to remove Nylin in a chance to save the rest of the world, if you like, because it was just this cesspool of war while they tried to control whatever this wild magic is that roils around Nylin. We've not seen a lot of it lately, mainly because we've been underground. There's been a lot going on, but that wild magic still exists out there, and there is a lot of it occurring. You've seen some of those wild magic events, but it just seems to be this place of wild magic, so you don't know if that was what brought you there, or it was used as part of what brought you there. You've still not fully understood why yet, I don't think, either. No, we don't know that yet. Another thing along what you just said, actually, is as a reminder, jumping back to Ironforge, is when we learnt that Timiel was, dealt that blow, but also that Dawnbringer was actually the one to deal the blow as well. And as a bit of a cover of this, that is also when Dargon then gave up Dawnbringer to have her essentially repaired. So back then, Dawnbringer was just a I can't remember what it's called. Is it called a sun sword or something? Sunblade.
Sunblade, that's the one. So it was literally...
I mean, Dawnbringer as a sunblade exists as a magic item in D&D that I have totally bastardised since then.
But yeah, so I had the vanilla item, so to speak, or Dargon did, and so was simply a handle, a hilt, and that was it. Was able to create this blade of energy, of light, but you will then find out later how then Dawnbringer came back in what form.
Absolutely.
We were told at that time, yes.
Timiel then said at the time that when you need her, she will be there with you, because she is sentient, and she was Timiel's right hand, quite literally, wielded by him, but was broken at the time as well. So the minute she sort of delivered that final blow, she was broken as well, in a sort of Lord of the Rings-esque type
I was going to say
moment.
In a way that was, dealing that blow was sort of shattering to her because it wasn't against her better judgment.
Well, it's against the core of what she is as well. She is a holy blade at the end of the day, and to do such an unholy act would break her.
Shatter her,
Yeah. So, but there's then that dynamic between Dawnbringer, Timiel's wrath as she is now, and Dargon, and how that relationship has developed over time. It was very, very close, and then she's taken away from Dargon, and Dargon has to adapt without her, and now Dargon has her back, and I think you're still sort of building back up to that place where you two are almost as one again.
Yeah, there is still that, disconnect still that Dargon's dealing with, not quite knowing, going, is this the same sword, and so on. So yeah, there is some of that going through his mind.
Absolutely. So yes, so where do we get to from there? It was Glentuag. We had the Blood Moon Blade handed over to the Malt Masters, and there was that level of distrust. As I say, a lot of shopping, and thanks to Anders' winnings from the original Fight Pit pre-stream back in Moonbright, finally got to spend some of that well-earned coin, well-earned in air quotes, and got a variety of other items. Obviously, Bothrid's favourite item with his Javelin of Lightning had been lost in the fight with the Kraken, so he used that moment to
I would love to point out one thing that never really came to light, and it may have been that we've touched upon it since. That was, as we got to Greenflower, we came up with, do we say we're travelling, not Moonbright, Greenflower? Yeah, as we got to Greenflower, we said, shall we give a cover for the fight? Why are we here? Are we travelling mercenaries? What are we on a quest? What are we doing? And we wanted to actually hide what we were doing, so it was going to be that I was the champion of Moonbright, as I had been, and that there was the my manager, my bard, my whatever it was back then, and a minor bodyguard with us. That was our ruse. It was about one episode long. It wasn't even an episode, it was one session long. It was pre-stream. I think we may have touched on it once before, as it didn't work before. Shall we try it once more? But it was funny that was what we were intended to do, and it became from that fight where he earned all his money. And it was just very interesting, the fact that was our intention, and then obviously it suddenly blew up to how massive a quest the four of us then became more on. So
absolutely
very interesting.
And there's the point in that pre-stream fight as well, which we don't get to touch on very often, but within this world the Warforged are rare, really 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 rare, and there's a history to them. And obviously the one that Dargon, or the champion that Dargon beat to become the champion of Moonbright, was this Warforged entity, which ultimately blew up in this colossal explosion due to you piercing a certain element of it.
And I believe that it was also that it was, I was going to say embroidered, that's the wrong word, but emblazoned with Cord's symbol, if I recall.
It was emblazoned with Cord's symbol.
And as we've also seen more recently with Feltag, he also had a symbol, and with certain knowledge of his story, we understood. Well, we were starting to surmise. Were there many Warforged, of which there was at least one from each of the gods, essentially. So I don't know again whether that's going to become apparent later down the line. And again, I want to touch on that later, but there's a great thing about the lock that I think we want to come to as well.
Absolutely. So, yes, I suppose swiftly moving on. We've been chatting for an hour already around this, which is ridiculous. This is how much we've put into this season so far, or this campaign so far. I suppose we're only on the third major arc now, which was then the Ruins of Ixalan.
Yes.
So as things are getting cold in Glentuag and the Maltmasters Keep, it's a case of the Maltmasters say, okay, well, this, that, and the other's going on. You can go hunt down another prophecy. We don't know where they are. You could go check out this over here, or there's some disturbances going on close by in the Ruins of Ixalan. And arguably one of my favourite arcs so far. The descent into Ixalan was amazing anyway.
Yeah.
Not only from the fact that Ander had purchased a necklace of fireballs, which just meant chaos ensued everywhere, but it was the first time I'd presented a mystery that you had to follow through, and it's the first time I could really feel the whole party going, what the fuck is down here?
I'd also like to point out that we honestly went to the ruins going, we're going to get rid of a bunch of ruffians, right? That this is a mere quiff on the side of whatever we're doing. And it blew up in our face like I've never seen anything else blow up in our face before. It doesn't like Moonbright being lost to us while we're standing there. It doesn't even compare to how wrong we were at Iskalion.
As I say, I think Ixalan for me is the biggest what the fuck moment ever in our campaign so far. And I think you get getting so far down there, and you're starting to realise there's a draconic theme going on here.
Yes.
There's orbs of fire. There's a marble statue of a dragon. There's these werebears, which are kobolds and white kobolds, and there's humans involved and stuff like that. And it's at that moment, of course, that Dargon gets infected with lycanthropy.
Yep.
During that whole situation. So Dargon's been through the ringer. Anders been through the ringer. Kirik, not yet. Has a little bit. Hasn't yet to go fully through the ringer.
Well, more recently, it really hit upon him what happened to him recently again. We'll touch on that later.
Yeah, it did.
That has hit him hard.
Absolutely. So then we've got descending into this cave, tomb-like structure, getting colder and colder all the while, and then you go through those moments of why? What is going on down here? Why have we got these cultists doing stuff? What's this draconic theme all about? I need to get to the final room, and it's literally like nobody had figured anything out other than the fact that there's something to do with the dragon here. And it's that map reveal moment.
I think had we got to the point of knowing or thinking, right, is there a dragon trap down here, or is it we knew something was amiss, but yeah, we didn't quite know truly what was going on.
Yeah, so you'd got, as I say, you'd got the point that there's something to do with the dragon here.
Yeah.
And it's not a little dragon either. This is potentially a big bastard. But I think you all thought it was going to be a live, dormant dragon, and that final map reveal of just the 7 groups of cultists and these lines of magical fire burning everywhere as I hit the mic as my token gesture for a Mortal Magic episode, even though it's a mid-season recap. Just these lines of fire everywhere, and then Andy just starts popping off fireballs, and it just fuels the spell.
I'd also love to, as you say, it fuels the spell. I would also just love to point out one of the movie gold moments for us. Was that map reveal. I think even the Malt Magic and More afterwards, we even replayed the map reveal.
Oh, yes.
Because it was just so truly ridiculous when we just went, what are we looking at? And I just, the look on all of our faces, the noise from all of us just going, what on earth is this? And it did look stunning.
Yes. So there was, and I highly recommend anybody who's not watched that episode, just go watch the Ixalan arc. It's fantastic. And what I'll do as part of the social media after we've done this is I'll put together a little bit of a sort of a content, if you like, around these episodes of this arc, these episodes of that arc, and I'll tell you which episode you need to watch for the Ruins of Ixalan arc, and the final bit of that final episode for that arc, if you like, is the reveal of not a dragon, but a dragon corpse, which gets brought back to life. And yeah, as Zapanir the White, as you know from the brands on the cultists. And yeah, Zapanir flies off, crashes through the ceiling of this ice cave, and flies off into the ether, who knows where. Only recently has she popped back into the fold. But it was that it's been my favourite moment of a reveal. No, you don't. But it's been my favourite reveal so far, up until I think probably something that happened last week, which we will get to. So yeah, Ixalan, even though it feels like a short arc, for me it's the most fun. Well, one of the most fun ones so far, just because of that mystery element to it all.
Yeah.
And you all went through there. As I say, Vraco pops up at one point.
Yeah.
It's the first bit of real, do we rest here, don't we rest here? The sense of urgency, but at the same time, the economy around your abilities starts to come in really, really well there, and starting to think, can we afford to take a long rest? Is it just a short rest? How do I get the most out of what we're going for here, with everything building and building and building to this sort of crescendo, which is this huge, great group of cultists. And as I say, in that moment, Anders' instinct is to go, they need to die, so he kills them with fireballs and fuels the spell, literally quickens the spell.
Yeah.
There is a moment in there where you almost stopped everything from going on. There's a single moment And Dargon, sort of key to that at one point, has hold of something and is running with something and lets it go. Or it's taken from him.
Yeah, as I
he's
say,
gone.
it was a terrible grapple check, and I think we'd also damaged the box, so that it was within one hit of being destroyed anyway. But of course, we'd already seen that breaking and killing was actually quickening this spell. We'd got that partway through, so it was like, as much as we don't, yes, we could have done. Our fears were not to do that, to actually get it out, and it was the way the dice rolls.
It was.
But I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because otherwise we wouldn't be where we are now, and we wouldn't have this intrigue of who is she involved with, who is she, where is she, and just so very interesting as to that. And I suppose we've assumed she is an enemy. It would be very interesting to know whether we can actually trace more information.
Absolutely, and I think because you've got that looming doom, if you like, that looming dread of what is this thing, it's introduced that interesting dynamic. And again, for Kirik, that's an undead dragon.
Yeah,
I'm not happy with that as Kirik.
Yeah.
This is now my end game now. So, and Kirik rightly calls that out in one of our recent episodes around this is the end game.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was More Magic and More last week called it out. This is Kirik's end game.
Yeah.
This is what he's here to do. Like, screw the prophecies. There's this huge, great undead thing running around. I can't have that.
Dargon is also super interested to meet her, purely to work out what did she mean when she went, "Come find me." Right now, he knows now that it was the fact that it was when the because it was when it develops, when it grows. That was something like that. Because we know now that was the lycanthropy, but the thing is, he's been able to control it with a lot of help. It would be so interesting to him to go, why? Was it you just wanted a lackey? But there's that niggle behind of why? Why have you said that? What does it actually mean? And to a potential naivety, wants to know because thinks it may not be just that, you'll be a good lackey for me, and so there is that hidden potential.
Absolutely, and that lycanthropy in the moment, as I say, it was sort of propagating through Dargon's system at the time.
Yeah.
Didn't really rear its ugly head until, I suppose, around Christmas, for us, the Midwinter's Festival in the game, because we've always got to have a little bit of a Christmas flair in there.
Of course.
So yeah, it's been one hell of an arc, that one. It's one I am now up to and thoroughly enjoying again in the podcast as I listen to the podcast again. So yeah, please go check them out as well. It's so much fun listening to them over again. So you deal with that or don't deal with that, and then you get back outside, find Vraco's pack, and head back to the Malt Masters, only to realise that they have not heard anything from you. They've not heard anything from Vraco. They need a full debrief of what's going on.
But also, we go back the first time, and we are at that point livid. Right, that's when we get back on our fully untrustworthy, because not only we have the suspicions, you went, go to Ironforge, find some information, and it was carnage. But okay, that's forgivable. It's on your doorstep, and you say there's a bit of a misgivings here, and we nearly die and lose one of the lieutenants. That's when we lose our shit.
Absolutely. I think that presented the moment of you're sending us into the Dragon's Maw, quite literally.
Yeah.
With no explanation, no reason why it's us, nothing. And on the flip side, what do the Malt Masters do? They make you lieutenants.
Yeah.
They escalate your position within the guild.
Which I think we took as, okay, thanks very much, and fair play, thank you. That gives us a little more of a feeling of trust. But in the same breath, also, sort of, is this bribery, sort of thing. And again, you see throughout the following arc how we mistrust everything they say. And yeah, just really interesting how we're like, there's something amiss here. And how we eventually decide that we are going to not only be lieutenants of the Malt Masters, but our own group as well. And that's where it all started. That's I want to call it separation. It's not really a Malt Masters that we feel at the moment. So maybe yeah, it was that was our first idea of separation then, which was very weird.
Absolutely, but it's the beginning of this downward trend for the Malt Masters, and an upward trend for yourselves, where the Malt Masters came in and you understood them to have come to Nyland and sort of been a force for good, and this leadership force, at least a unification force for this continent that is just in chaos. And they've brought people together, they've rescued people, they've developed this community in Glentuag, and now it seems like they're just losing grip of that slowly but surely at the time where you guys are just coming up in power.
The interesting thing there was the fact that, when we go, who told us that? Well, they did. So it was one of those, like, are we being spun a yarn that is, well, actually, to be honest, guys, realistically, you're the ones who've just told us this. So, is that, do you actually protect everyone? And I think we believe that, yes, they did actually, protect and used to have that connection. But as we found again more recently, they had burnt as many bridges as they'd made. We honestly believe that the Malt Masters were holding Nyland together. They were holding a very tiny portion of it together, and certainly, more recently, barely anything together. So it really was that we had been spun a yarn that we were, being looked after and working for the people of Nyland, and realised that actually we needed to start working for the people of Nyland. And actually we've been working for 4 people previously. So very interesting at that point to realise that.
Absolutely. And it's all these little bits you forget, really. Sort of these little nuances in the story that are actually probably the most interesting parts, like around that distrust and the Wardens, as they are now called, but at the time there's just the 4 of you wandering around this world.
Probably been kicked to the curve. I say probably, definitely been kicked to the curve, but the 4 of us legitimately, say 3 of us, 4 of us, legitimately wanted to walk in there and bust shit up. And it was honestly as close to one of them looks the wrong way, and that's it. And it was so interesting how close it got. In our little player discussions, just how close we got to that, and to the degree that thankfully we decided on the worst case scenario is we just walk out, because up until then it wasn't that was the only choice. It was that we actually fight, and obviously it would have gone badly for us, but it was very interesting that was an option for us in our heads.
And of course, moments of hilarity ensued because we had the Zone of Truth popped up.
Freaking brilliant that was.
Anders' mental thing was, if there's a Zone of Truth, that means my verbal filter and sort of my firewall, if you like, of thoughts going from brain to mouth is just non-existent. So another episode, if anybody wants to check out just some pure brilliant comedy gold, go and check out the Zone of Truth moment. We should probably clip all these at some point, and we'll go back through and pull all these out. But so, I mean, we've been chatting for an hour and 20 minutes now. I think we deserve a little break, mate. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, go get another drink, go refresh, and we'll come back and we'll deal with sort of the second half of our first half of the campaign, second quarter of the first half, if you like. But in that meantime, anybody who's watching, if you've got any questions for the campaign, if you've got any questions over things we've discussed, either reach out to us on the chat. If you want to ping us a message on Twitter, you can do that as well. The Twitch chat is where it's at, though, so if you want to come and join us in there, got any questions, anything you wanted to know about the universe or about what's happening in the campaign, please let us know. The other thing I forgot to mention right at the beginning is we are still running the 50 follower goal, or if you like, the campaign, so to speak. When we hit 50 followers, we will be choosing one follower from that 50 to create an NPC alongside us to feature in the game. So please don't miss out on that opportunity. You've heard how much fun it's been already. Let's get a bit of your personality in the game. So don't miss out on that chance. Be sure to follow on Twitch, like and subscribe on YouTube, all of those sorts of things. Get yourselves in a chance to create that NPC alongside me. I've already said I'm going to throw in one of the t-shirts as well. Mr. Ix is adequately modelling one of those today, so we'll show it to you after the break. But yeah, we'll take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll deal with what else has happened in the Forgotten Kingdom of Nylin. Hello! We are back. We just thought it'd show you the blank, empty screens of our two... That side, Matt, that side of our two fallen comrades for this week. So, we miss you both. Wishing and a very, very speedy recovery, and of course, Kirik, somehow with work. Very little can be helped there, buddy. So
work takes
get
precedence.
back to us soon.
Yeah.
Indeed. So life always takes precedence. In fact, on that moment, I think somehow will be missing for the next couple of weeks because he is taking some well-deserved holiday at the same time as well. So there's some things planned for Kirik, but that's for Samau and I to reveal. So let's get back to our campaign 1 mid-season or mid-campaign recap. Having just sort of finished talking about the ruins of Ixalan, and now coming back to that new dynamic with the Malt Masters being elevated up to lieutenant level. There's the whole Christmas bit that happens in the middle of that, and of course the emergence of Dargon's werebear form as well during that sort of mid-arc sequence, if you like, the bit of the Christmas break, I will call it. Which presented a lot of fun opopportunities. And Nick turned up one point on a sleigh.
That whole period was just hilarious and fun. Really enjoyed it.
There is one thing that I will call out, and only because Kirik did do legend lore at the time as well.
Yeah. Is
the fact that you went into the northern sort of woods of Glen Tuag and these mountains and found this Titan-sized statue.
Yeah.
And there was a great bit of lore that popped up there around a certain power or force and how they had many followers and they have since fallen. The whole, again, just lore building for the world more than anything. It's not necessarily got anything to do with our story, but again, there's these moments which just laying the plot foundations for, hopefully, if people still enjoy this, moving into campaign 2. We're going to do campaign 2 regardless, whether we're still streaming at that time. We'll let the viewers decide. But we will do a campaign 2, and all of these little bits will come together as part of that.
I was going to say, it's one of those things I know that we've wanted to get back to, but again, going more pressing things, yes, we would love to know more about that statue back there, what it particularly pertains to, so on and so forth, but we've had to, not... We currently can't sit there and go throughout the whole campaign the whole time, and unfortunately this is not a game to play on the console where we can just go in and go, do not start this mission unless you've completed everything that you would like to, because it's not time for that, and that's great because
Life
it doesn't mean
work like that.
Yeah, we do leave things unsaid. Now, from the point of view of the actual game, the story, then that is, like you say, it's like life. From a game point of view, and certainly for the DM's point of view, and those people out there who wanted to run their own, it also means that don't, for the love of God, tell someone about that bit they didn't ever do, because you can carry it on to campaign 2, and maybe they'll do it then. So yeah, just keep an eye out, guys.
There is going to be bits that cross over in our campaigns. We still, for the end of this campaign, it is open. There is things that are planned, but of course, it's up to you, as the players, to really decide what you want to do and where you want to go with this world that we've created. So, yeah, we will see what happens when we get there. Of course, there's still a journey to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of that journey, I suppose, started with then the rest of, as I say, that Vraco arc moving to the Isle of the Dead. Sort of post-winter scenes and post-little bits of lore and sort of all the presents that you gave each other, which Ander then just pissed up the wall by opening a deck of cards. But
going to get Vraco set off a chain of events that have led us to where we are now, in my mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that happen because there's moments that are revisited during this arc, such as sort of you reacquaint yourselves with Captain Swift, who you'd kind of neglected a lot.
Yeah.
After having sent her to Glen Tuag, just hadn't gone and done anything with them. Pissed off to Ixalan, came back, still wasn't contacting them. She banged on your door. She walked in like, what the fuck? What is going on?
Which also, guys, you know, if you haven't seen that again, that whole, you know, section, that arc, you'll see that the players themselves we kept remembering, but we kept remembering them too late. You know, we at the start of episodes, end of episodes, we were like, damn, we were meant to go and speak to them. And it was just so funny how farcical it got that we kept forgetting, to the point that, then, you know, Captain Swift actually turned up. And honestly, such a funny section. Because, and again, if you've had it in your own games, you'll know that, just things slip by the wayside. But the way it worked was hilarious.
Absolutely. I think it was just so much was going on at that time as well. And as a DM, I've thrown a lot at you. It's not been like you've got this full arc that we just close off and then we move on. Yeah. Actually, our arcs are so interwoven that it tells more of a richer story the way I feel it. There's not been a full conclusion to any arc properly yet. There's been a few moments with things going on and certain doors have been closed. But I'd say they've been closed and not locked is the analogy I'm going to use there.
Yeah.
So Captain Swift returns, and again through discussions with the Malt Masters and understanding where Vraco's gone, and sort of through dream sequences and a few other pieces, you figure out that Vraco is on this Isle of the Dead, which is just a totally barren island to the south of the majority of the continent of Nylin. And you've got a little bit of history around it, that there's a huge great hole in the middle of this island that leads who knows where. We obviously now know where it leads. But it is just nothing lives there. So the only way to get there realistically is by air, with knowing that the seas themselves are tumultuous, totally unpredictable, and with the magic of Nylin, no clue as to whether you'd actually get there. And even the air journey itself presented those moments. But before we even got to that, it was the revisiting of past actions, and those actions having consequences.
Yeah.
And we have the Vertigal Sky Battle, the Green Dragon Vertigal, or Vertigal, attacking the ship with a couple of wyverns, or wyverns, however you want to pronounce that one. And there's that whole moment of, oh shit, the things we do in this world have real consequences, and real things happen. You can't just kill a dragon's brother and not happen to face the consequences of that.
Yeah.
So that was, again, another bit of fun as you then approach the Isle of the Dead. And I had a lot of fun with the Isle of the Dead. I think most people who know me will know I've got two bit of nerdy tendencies when it comes to sort of magical stuff. It's that horror fantasy side of things, not deep horror, but like the Sleepy Hollow type stories, the old-fashioned ghost stories, those sorts of things, and the Fae, and all things fairy. I'm a bit of a total weirdo in that sense. The fairy world fascinates me. If you've ever read any of the Meredith Gentry novels, I love those as inspiration as well. Granted, it's almost softcore porn, but Laurel K. Hamilton is herself a great author, so I highly recommend you to check those books out if you've not read them. And they do form some serious ideas for what I've used in the Fate world. But going back to the Isle of the Dead and around this sort of death and that horror element, bringing you to an island where nothing is living. And it's also where Incarnate really started to come out, and I was able to develop some awesome maps. And it was that moment where, okay, we are landing on an island. Nothing's living here. There's no help for us here. What do we do? What do we discover? Where is Vraco? And I think at the time, was it Kirik was using a particular spell to locate Vraco?
Yeah.
Now,
I'd also like to point out that was when we started to work as a real group, I feel, in our planning. No matter, and this happens everywhere, no plan survives contact with the enemy. But the fact that we planned, the fact that we even tried, was different to what we were doing before. So when our plan failed, we still knew kind of what was going to happen. Now I say that we've got Andrew on our group, so we never quite knew what was going to happen. But at least we did have times where we were going to go, well, if this happens, we do this, and so on and so forth. So one good thing that I think we did there was we did work out how the hell we were going to communicate with the ship.
I think it was also you had a full exit strategy.
Yeah.
Knowing that this place was isolated, it was like, we need, whatever goes on, we need an out.
Yeah.
And you had that exit strategy there. The airship was just hovering in place, like anchored, just in a place where they thought they'd be safe. And you could go and explore the island, and you'd I think you'd given yourselves a couple of hours, which I cocked up during the stream, or sort of between episodes saying you'd given yourself a couple of days. No, you'd given yourselves like 12 hours to go and find Vraco and then get the fuck out of Dodge.
It was an incredibly short amount of time, I recall.
Absolutely. Yeah. But in game time, we've spent months doing like a 2-day sequence. So, got onto the Isle of the Dead and found where Vraco was, and then were presented with this elven-like
what were those dead
creature.
tree stumps, by the way?
The tree stumps.
Yes.
Yeah, they're always good fun. So they are directly from the Creature Codex, I believe it was, Kobold Press.
Yeah.
And they are something stumps. I'll have to remember the exact name at some point. But yeah, they were basically this undead tree stump.
They had like tentacles
still
or something
partially,
in them. It was just incredible.
They had this dark soul of something in them.
Yeah.
Which was important to what the Isle of the Dead is linked to. And so he presented with this elven-like creature as well, who is somehow able to control these tree stumps at the same time. And they seem to be cultivating sort of the horticulture in the area, the agriculture. They seem to be in control of that. But you're led to this decrepit, demolished keep on the island, and led into this court, which is the only way to describe it, of beautiful but sinister creatures, very quickly identified obviously as vampires. And it's interesting the way my mind works actually as I go through these. I seem to sort of focus myself on one type of creature and think, okay, we're going to explore that today. So the vampire bit was fun, but I think for me that the crux of it was we needed to get Vraco out, and so Ander made the decision, I will trade myself. I'm going to reveal that I have been told I am the heir to Nihilin, which is something that was discovered in those mountains again during the Ironforge arc, like the beginning of the Ironforge arc, that you found the tomb of Garth, not Girth, as everyone seems to keep calling him. He's a quite stocky bloke. He's a girthy folk, but a girthy bloke even. But his name is Garth. So King Garth. He was the father of the 3 brother kings, and the last king of Nihilin, if you like, or the last true king of Nihilin. Looked uncannily like Ander in this tomb, and it's at that point in the Isle of the Dead where Ander for the first time reveals this to potential enemies, and they make the decision of, well, royal blood is better than just the blood of an enemy, so we'll keep you and you can have Vraco, knowing that they'd already turned Vraco as well.
I was going to say, plus they've already done their worst, so that was very interesting. And I believe that we've already been told this now, but we did also see the husband of one of the Malt Masters there. Because that was also one thing that we heard, that there was previous attempts to that isle, and it had, losses, and we obviously found out who. So.
Yeah, so you've not heard any great detail about the previous incursions, only other than the fact that the blender and her husband at the time were a part of that, and she was sort of held back, or was not left behind, but didn't have to go on the front lines, but he never returned. And in those moments, there are key figures within inside the court that you can pick out. There's Duke Orfeo himself, who is sort of the leader of this group. Katrina, his sort of betrothed wife, consort, whatever you want to call it. You've never really got to that point of understanding that relationship. But then there's other figures within the court. One of which is this tiefling, who you can only surmise is the husband of the Blender at this moment in time, and I don't think you've fully revealed that to the Blender yet either. Sort of laid the foundations and planted the seeds, but not actually fully explained what you've seen on the island, nor has she pressed for it yet. But I think in that moment we get one of my other favourite moments on stream in terms of, from a DM's perspective, what the actual fuck, where Kirik, with his brand new cape that he's been gifted as a Christmas present or a Midwinter's Festival present, in a perfect speech as well, which I will not spoil. Please go check this episode as well. The speech that he gives to Ander, and then the moment he dimension doors out of the court, as you're all leaving with Vraco, Bothrid and Dargon are leaving with Vraco, and Anders getting there ready to stay behind, in a moment that he's gone, oh shit, I really shouldn't have agreed to this, and Kirik just gone. And then we get a chase sequence, which is, for a DM, one of the hardest things ever to try and manage. So this is where I get to shout out Kasoon as one of our patron accounts, the patron account that I'm subscribed to, because they have a chase sequence tool on their website. So if you've not used it as a DM, please go check that out. There's so many cool generators and stuff on Kasoon, but that chase sequence manager, if you like, was an absolute godsend. I was still using my notebook at the same time. I was sort of drawing lines and like, okay, 50 feet and then 20 feet back and all this sort of stuff. But eventually the party got themselves up to the Winter's Tale and just gone. The key part of that conversation, of course, was around the fact that they'd been pushed out of their home. So there was an element of, yes, they are evil, but all they want to do is go home.
The intrinsic problem there was the fact that Dargon was still sort of, yeah, okay, all right, maybe we'll do this. He wants Vraco back. He kind of is in that desperate stage of we'll do anything, not knowing that he's already returned. But maybe he could help. I don't know whether that's altruism. I don't know whether it's just let's just try and get on with this unpleasant task. Anders trying to swerve out of it. Kirik is going, for the love of God, I am not having anything to do with these guys. And it was so interesting how that tore. It didn't tear the party at all, but it tore what we were all thinking of doing. And as much as it made Dargon uneasy, he kind of went, well, okay, fuck it, we'll work out how to get Ander back. I'm not leaving him, but we've come here to do what we need to. We'll come and get him again later. Dargon was already thinking about, right, we can use the airship, we can come back in, and again do some sort of drop into the castle. So many other things that we were trying to think of, but obviously triggering the idea of the fact that actually none of that had to happen, we were just going to book it, was so much fun.
It was so good. I've just had a picture of like a Shrek / Mission Impossible moment with Dargon there, just sort of flipping through the air. I think it's Pinocchio in Shrek, of course, who gets himself tangled up, but Dargon just sort of woof.
Yep, absolutely. That's what he. I think we even spoke about that before even hitting the island. Were we going to try and essentially dangle one of us into there? And I think it was that we were going to try and dangle us in there, and it was possibly like going to be all three of us or two of us. We were going to go in. We were going to try and find Vraco. Kirik would dimension door him out, and then one or both of us would then have to fight our way out. So it was very interesting in the way that was an idea, and that then became, okay, that realistically was right. This is plan B. This is what we're going to do to get Ander out instead of Vraco. To then have to then very quickly change, and I obviously that dimension door thing was just astonishing. But then for us to be like, oh crap, we saw them ahead, thunderwave this guy out of the way and peg it, was just, again, one of those, what the hell have we got ourselves into? But it was so much fun.
But some dice rolls there, which are absolutely fantastic as well, and drove the narrative forward. You could have fucked Thunderwave totally. They could have been just stood there firm, but no, they got blasted out of the way.
Even Kirik, I believe even Kirik took my hand axe, as in took a hit from the hand axe, just to get me a little closer.
Absolutely.
You know,
I think we can safely say,
well.
in that sequence, Kirik was by far MVP, because not only did he Dimension Door Ander out of this shadow court of vampires, but also then deliberately took a hit from a hand axe so that you could Misty Step and get closer, and then just up the ladders and off you go. So the whole sequence, I think that's really, and I think it comes out with the Ixalan and then Isle of the Dead. It's really where you guys as players properly came together as well, and just the whole nature of the way this group worked changed, because there's these moments that now start to come out, which is just pure role play, pure awesomeness, if I can use that term, which I've had nothing to do with. I have just literally laid the groundwork down and sort of put this sandbox environment out there, and you guys are just going through it and cracking on with stuff now, and it's so much fun as a DM to watch the players come on as well and develop as players, but also the characters develop and the emotions and the interlinks. And I think it was these were the moments where, again, Kirik cemented himself truly as a member of the group, and that familial bond begins to form between the four of you.
The fact that we all want to look after each other there. And interestingly, this is something I don't think I even spoke about in the Malt, Magic and More of that episode. Dargon was very uneasy about leaving Ander, because he was a very close friend and had been a lot longer friend than Kirik had been. We liked Kirik and we liked Bothrid, but Ander and Dargon were, to be honest, thick as thieves. So what we wanted to do then
good choice of pun there.
Absolutely, that's the point. and if it wasn't for probably a couple of choices, we may have seen Dargon bend to that will. We don't know. He hasn't. That's not the way he's gone. But leaving him on that island was not something that he was happy with. Obviously, as I've just touched upon. He was also deeply uneasy the way that Kirik seemed to just be okay with it. But of course, the second that he then saw them arrive and Dimension Door ahead, because he obviously never heard any of the speech, never knew any about that, just they arrived outside. Piecing those two things together, bearing in mind that Dargon gave him that gift, meant that there was that, Kirik's braining this, and that cemented that friendship, and obviously the run that Bothrid and Dargon did also has cemented that in. But I think Bothrid and Dargon were also quite close anyway. But yeah, well,
Bothrid presents an interesting concept anyway throughout this whole campaign, because he started as just a prisoner that you quickly adopted and sort of brought along for the ride, to the point where I could have used traditional sidekick rules, but that puts more pressure on you as players anyway. Somebody's got to manage that sidekick, and it also doesn't really allow for decent, not until Tasha's anyway did we get proper sidekick capabilities to grow and sort of understand those sidekicks. So I've just been running them as a player, really, which means I get to play in the game. I have to do a lot of things with Bothrid and just hold back, which is why as a sidekick just think, like, if I was a player I would be all over this shit and be doing that right now, but I don't. It's just Bothrid is there as sort of the dumb lovable character,
but also he's been token Mike smack there. He also has on occasion been, I think, a very useful tool for you to put us back in line, not in a bad way ever, but honestly has been so helpful that we've just been going down in a spiral, and suddenly Bothrid's back there to go, quit it, and it's been so useful because it would be weird if it was a NPC that came in to do that, whereas Bothrid's been with us. Bothrid sees where we go and what happens, and is going, no, why are you fighting? And it's just been so interesting, to have that, because you do sometimes just need that in the party, and that's what's great is that our characters do disagree on numerous occasions, but that friendship's always still there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe the rewards were the friends we made along the way. That whole
yeah,
that's that whole meme. So yeah, no, it's good, and I love the character of Bothrid personally. I love what we've created there between the four of us, actually, because it's your guys and your interactions with Bothrid that drive things forward. Like the whole chef thing, I was like, okay, that's now becoming a thing.
That was brilliant. That was amazing. Yeah,
people giving me gardens and all sorts of crazy stuff. Just like, okay, we'll develop this into a full thing, to the point where we gave him a feat on a level up, which is always good fun. So yeah, he's become this character, but again, another key part of the foursome, if you like, key part of the Wardens. So yes, getting Vraco back proved a challenge, not only on the island, but then back in the skies.
So two things there. And as D&D's wonderful, I know the answer to this is that you expected everything and everything and nothing to happen, and you can obviously bend with whatever does happen. But did you expect us to get him back? Like, your original thing, can I ask, what did you anticipate as, the most likely thing to happen?
So, you guys bypassed a whole subplot.
Which was us going into...
descending into the Shadowfell.
Yep.
I had a whole Shadowfell bit ready to go, maps and all, NPCs, everything was just there, laid out, ready, but as you say, it's D&D. I can open the right door, you'll go through the left.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, and that was definitely it. As a thing I've said, Dargon was willing to do it. Dargon knew that this was a plan. Dargon was unhappy with that, but was going to go ahead with it. Ander threw the first curveball. Kirit sent it home. And it's like, okay, yeah. But I really did want to know where we meant to get him back, because then, the very following episode, we lost him and the entire ship. And that was when it, when I again went, was that also intentional, or was that a random dice encounter?
So being totally candid, all of the wild magic events that have ever happened in Nylin are the roll of a dice.
It's just, but I love it though. I do love that. And
so it is all of it. It's wild magic, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the wild magic surge table.
Yep.
Just every so often I will roll a dice, and then I've got a list of shit that can happen. And sometimes I just make it up on the fly, depending on what's happened.
Bearing in mind that we had a thing when we were still trying to work out that whether Ander had some miracle million gold priced silk in his chest, right? Because it had to have a reason. What do you want about? Of course, this has some meaning. It was fucking wild magic, and I loved the fact that we got bogged down on that. Like, we've got to come back to this. This hasn't finished. This must mean something. No, it didn't mean anything. And I loved it.
But that's the nature of Nylin, really. I wanted to build a world where this primordial, chaotic energy just exists and manifests itself whenever it fucking pleases. So there will be more of that to come, I'm sure, as depending on the dice rolls. So, I mean, it's not a huge chance that it'll happen, and there may, being totally candid, as things continue, it will probably happen more and more depending on the route you go down.
Yeah.
The probabilities will increase. But yes, it introduces a very interesting concept for me. We had it in Moonbright pre-stream.
Yep.
Just random monsters appearing out of the ether as these portals opened up. We've had it with the Silk, just randomly appearing out of as that arcane bolt hits Ander, and everybody thinks, oh shit, he's going to die. But no, Silk just pops out. Why not? And then, as we're coming back from the Isle of the Dead, I rolled probably the best one I could have, which was an arcane storm that breaks people apart and just literally sends them wherever. So the whole point of it is you can land anywhere in the world. So I had to do some more dice rolls to determine who goes where. Luckily, you guys all stuck together, otherwise that really would have fucked my day.
Wow.
But then the only person you're left with is Feltag. Like, just the 4 Wardens and Feltag outside of a forest of unknown origin, unknown where you could have been in a whole different world. You had no idea where you were, no idea where the rest of the crew were. And then this second event happens as a sort of follow-on event, which is the huge great worm-like creature that appears and instantly feeble minds Kirik.
Just amazing that it could happen to Kirik, that it not only completely diverts our entire train of thought and direction, but also I must also give again massive shout out to Samal's acting capability of working with being feeble-minded, right? Acting out exactly how Kirik would be, describing that to us, and also, I have to say, his patience of just sitting there while he can't say a freaking word. And it was just... I was in awe, constantly trying to be Dargon and also watching what Kirik was doing, because it was just wonderful to follow how that was not in any way fourth walled, ever. Just wonderful.
No, not at all. I mean, Samal does have the benefit of being an actor in general, and a fantastic actor he is.
Yeah.
If anybody ever gets the chance to see Samal doing Ibanquo, which he is hopefully doing soon, I believe, amazing stuff. The guy is a legend. As an actor, as a DM, he gets the whole concept of everything, and actually think that's helped both you and Danny in your RP generally as well.
Yeah.
You guys were getting there anyway, to be totally honest, but then bringing in Samal, who understands the game a little bit more than we did, being totally honest, he understands it more than I do. But yeah, it brings that whole new dynamic in, so it was great addition to the party. Not that we weren't having fun in the first place, but you're right, the acting that he can do, and that whole feeble-minded bit, and he's had some similar moments recently as well, which hopefully people will be slightly more aware of, where I as a DM have taken the cleric out of the game, just totally taken the cleric out, and it was the same with the feeble mind. He could no longer cast spells. All he was useful for was smashing. But you dealt with the worm, and then you were sort of began to understand the forest where you were, at least had a thought of where you were, retreated to the only city you could find, which turned out to be River's End, or Theoduin in Elvish, and discovered the leader, discovered their name, which linked back to the incidents in the lighthouse with the Serpent's Cloak, and the Mirafir family. So Arendriel was the name of the guy that had supposedly ordered the hit on a buyer, or ordered the arrest of a buyer, and you found his daughter leading the city of Theoduin, or as I say, River's End. You also then you got a hero's feast out of that, which is always good fun. But met a few other NPCs there. Also then found the house where the deeds that you had found way back when in, I believe in the lighthouse actually, the house that belonged to the 4 of you, and that in itself introduced a whole new set of chaotic moments, where you had to navigate around this house, and there was mimics, which are always good fun, but ultimately there was this contraption created by a wizard of old. Rather than becoming sort of a lich, they trapped their soul in this construct, if you like. And the question was then, what do we do with this construct? But Lord Areth at the time, was basically trying to worm his way into a body, depending on who presented the most viable option. So I don't know if you got at the time, but the questions I was asking, the riddles I was asking, whoever answered them got a point against them, and the more points you got, the more likely you were to be chosen as the candidate to be Aerith's body. And again, I don't know how he does it, but every time it is Danny and it is Ander in these moments that could totally screw himself over. So he had the dream, and then he was lured back, and then you had the fight with Aerith in this soul sphere, and also then the moments with the elementals and these different things that are going on. But this mansion itself is just, there's so much magic in there, and Dargon going through doing the tech magic at the time. Eventually, I mean, you come through that relatively unscathed, up until the point you start exploring the rest of the house.
Oh, man.
So there's moments where we're thinking, okay, we need to get back here, and then we can go here, and then we can do this. And Ander goes and steps on a doorway with a teleportation circle next to it, and instantly gets plane shifted to the Shadowfell. And I think it's Ander and Kirik who end up going, and Dargon and Bothrid are back there going, now what do we do?
Because I believe that Feltag followed them, so it was the three of them there.
Yeah, so the... I think, did Feltag go with them, or did he go with... I can't remember if it was with you or with them, but either way, Dargon and Kirik then go, well, oh shit, here we go. And you guys follow through, and then realise you're in a world where I don't know how do we get back? You're in sort of this mirror dimension. You're in the Shadowfell, so it's like a mirrored world, but the house is just a ruin. There's just the staircase there and a door. So Ander, in a sheer moment of brilliance, chooses to try and recreate a circle, and thanks to the bardic notion that he's got, has some capability to cast the spell, but ultimately it costs him more than he probably was expecting, and that's where he contracts another disease, which is slowly killing him. So Ander is definitely the one to get all sorts of magical STIs, I think. Or magical infections. So he contracts Mage Blight, which is a totally homebrewed concept. I just loved the idea of Ander trying to cast a spell that was beyond him, being able to do so because he understands it, but there being consequences to that. Again, I like the idea of introducing consequences to being... It allows you to do these super things on the odd chance, like craft a teleportation circle without really knowing what you're doing. And so you managed to teleport back to a familiar location, and you ended up in Moonbright, funnily enough.
I would love to, however, say that it was, I think, Samau and I... And the great thing is we were using our knowledge of D&D to completely screw ourselves over thinking we're in the wrong location. Because we thoroughly believed that we had travelled to yet another dimension, not Nylon. And we thought we were in the Feywild. Right? Our description of that, and we even asked at that point, like, did we see this, where was the sun and all this lot? Because we were like, we thoroughly believe that we have once again moved somewhere we don't want to be. And that was hilarious when we suddenly went, what do you mean that's Moonbright down there? It was wonderful.
Yes, that is very true, actually, because you did teleport back and you're a bit like, okay, this looks like the Feywild. It could be the Feywild. But yeah, rocked up to a city which turned out to be Moonbright, and you are welcomed back as champion, rightly so.
Yeah.
All the while trying to understand Ander's new affliction. And you go and see the Enchantress of Moonbright, who herself is a very beautiful, seductive woman, but indirectly to the fact where she sort of enchants people without meaning to do so. Again, if you're thinking popular references, Harry Potter, Veela type creatures, she comes across as that sort of creature, so beautiful that she just instantly dumbfounds figures around her.
Incredibly
but she also,
disarming, yeah.
Yeah, and she posed the only real connection to potentially breaking Ander's new curse or new affliction, if you like, which was to head into the Feywild as well. She planted the seeds of that. But in the meantime, there's this whole process of Dargon's championship of the city, and Dargon being a follower of Paylor, or at least a champion of Palor, or an acolyte of Palor through his patron of an angel of Palor, that doesn't sit right with the people of Moonbright who support Cord.
Yeah.
So this is where we meet the Archdeacon of Cord, who himself is just this huge beast of a man. And so we have a fight, and it's this moment.
No. Did we? Did we have the fight then? We did have the fight then. But also, we spoke about getting Vraco back. And
yes,
extremely torn Dargon going, the fuck do I want to do a fight for? I want to get, the whole reason we need to go and get Vraco. And obviously discussing that with the Archdeacon about, the fact that we need, that we need to do this. But also, that's when we also hear about the displeasure that Moonbright and himself have with the Maltmasters. Yet again, asserting or reassuring our fears of them not being totally in charge anymore. So again, a very interesting time. Hence the fact that I've entirely forgotten that, not entirely forgotten, but didn't twig that was also when we had the fight.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely, and that was sort of the central point of this moment, was that fight, because it did represent not just the displeasure at Palor being present as a champion inside this city that is totally devoted to Cord, but the Maltmaster's influence on that champion at the same time. There is this whole Vraco bit bubbling underneath as well, about the fact that Vraco once came from Moonbright and was once an acolyte of this very temple. So the Archdeacon is not a happy man at this point, really, but also poses this fight to really teach Dargon a bit of a lesson around combat, around true power and true devotion to a god at the same time. And that was brought out in the fact that the Archdeacon was able to manifest wings, was able to cast this huge great lightning spell at one point, kind of like Thor, those sorts of things. Which, I mean, if you read into the history of Cord and that particular deity, anybody that wields a hammer is just going to be Thor at that point. So there's no other way of doing it. But it did make a lot of fun, and ultimately, I mean, Dargon did lose, but in that moment, Timiel's wrath appears, and so Dargon gets a piece of himself back in that moment he needs it most, with Palor at least trying to give a hand to prove that actually I am still a force in this world. I may not have my followers that are devoted to me, but I have, or there's many followers as Cord currently has, but I have this individual who
I was going to say
that
against an entire town or city of Cord followers, against the champion of Cord, Palor went, yeah, of course I'm looking after him, and that was really good for Dargon, and also did again really directionalize his movements forwards, and obviously with in terms of playing D&D, the level ups and the changes that we made to Dargon around how that really did make a change.
Absolutely, and it's another defining moment in Dargon's history as a character. I think the return of Dawnbringer, understanding that she herself has fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
Almost the third incarnation
yeah.
of Dawnbringer. From what she was before, then when she became Dawnbringer, and now as Timiel's Wrath. Sort of the development of that as an artifact, really, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's an artifact. So we had that. There was a promise made to return Vraco when you found him.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it was a case of, okay, we need to get back to the Maltmasters. We need to try and fix whatever. This is where Feltag gets left behind. You fall asleep in an inn. He falls asleep downstairs, just shuts down as Warforged do, and you don't think to wake him, and you all just piss off. And I think there's a moment in that episode where you're all riding out of town, and I turn around and say, and in a moment as we flash back to the tavern, a Warforged wakes up and looks around, shrugs his shoulders and carries on. So Feltag is who knows where right now. Who knows what Feltag is doing, but I'm sure Feltag will pop up again at some point. So, I mean, importantly, you guys are still moving this story forward rather than going back thinking, oh, we've got to go fetch the robot that we forgot. So you go back to the Malt Master's Keep with two things really pressing now. There's Vraco and the missing crew of the Winter's Tale, but there's now Anders' debilitating condition. He can no longer cast spells, or if he does try to cast a spell, there's the potential after effects which could kill him. And you make the decision to go to Phaliad Forest, understanding that it is a portal to the Feywild. And this is where I get to play around in my sandbox a little bit and introduce the Fey, and again get to play around in Incarnate. And so we go into the Feywild, we venture through the Feywild, and the first port of call is finding the Dryad Spirit, which for so long has been supporting Ander and has been there in the background, a bit like Dawnbringer Timiel's Wrath has been there for Dargon, and the Raven Queen has been there for Kirik. So we have these moments where all these different sort of supporting factors are coming in, but Ander finally gets to meet his. I suppose we could argue through the campaign that Dargon's had moments with Timiel.
Yep.
Kirik's had moments with the Raven Queen.
Yep.
Ander's really not met this figure before, which is a Dryad spirit, other than in a tree form previously. So we go into the Dryad's Grove, and amazingly, pure DM mechanic there, the staff that Bothrid was gifted just happens to be the staff that they need to, as part of this spell, to cure the Mage Blight. Ander gets his rocks off with his Dryad deity, I suppose you could call it, if you like.
Like, you know, met her once as a tree form, meets her in person, immediately jumps on her. Of course, that's exactly what Ander does. Absolutely.
I mean, she instigated it.
Well, to be fair, yeah.
She instigated it, but she is also Fae, so there is that notion of the Fae being very tricksy and very seductive. So that heals the Mage Blight, and you also understand that...
Sorry, I mean, that didn't heal the Mage Blight. We went further in to heal the Mage Blight, I believe. We had to go further.
Well, yeah, so there's then the Underdark, if you like, of the Feywild, which is part of the spell, which is where we find the Deck of Many Things, where we have that moment. And as I think we've said, and you'll probably pick up from this recap, the funniest moments always seem to happen when Ander does something stupid.
Yep, always.
And during that episode, you can see on both yours and Samal's face of, Matt, what are you doing? Why are you giving this to him?
But it also, you know, from it worked wonderfully because I am just as new to D&D as you are, Matt. You know, so you've known about it ever so slightly longer than I have, but I then got, you know, riveted in watching, you know, loads of different stuff, listening to loads of other things, doing my research. I got, you know, fairly fanatical about it and interested. So I knew bits and bobs. We still didn't know it. Still don't know anywhere near as much as Samal, but it meant that Samal and I knew what the hell you just brought out. I'm going, as you say, what are you doing? Danny has played more campaigns than I have, but still is woefully and wonderfully ignorant with some bits, and is going along the journey, learning it as he goes, which I love. I have been that nerd and gone, I want to know. But because he picked that up, and you could see it in his eyes, he was like, I don't know what this is brilliant, I'm just carrying on with it. Just meant for the purest hilarity. And I honestly remember that whole 30 minutes that he was like with it like it was yesterday, because it was absolutely brilliant. Not only did he go, I'm going to pick a card, he picked 4.
Yes, that moment was ridiculous, but it shows the different types of players as well. You've got people like Samal, and to an extent myself, who we buy the books, we read the books, but then at the same time we're also very similar in the fact that we got into this together. We started this campaign as a bit of fun, something different to do on our whiskey and games nights, like let's pick something else to do, and we got into it, and in doing so then found the podcasts, found the shows, and we've learned through watching and listening to those at the same time. Danny is just purely learning through playing.
Yeah.
Like, he's got arguably the purest experience of D&D
absolutely
ever.
Yeah.
So we have these moments, and yeah, he picks 4. And one of the first cards is you lose all of your shit. Literally just, it's all gone. All of your magic items, gone.
Yeah.
So all of the stuff he had, some of the stuff he'd been gifted, just left with nothing.
Yeah.
And you're sort of being pursued at this point by a strange figure as well, this dark
I was going to come to
shadow
it. I didn't want to bring him up too early, but who the fuck is he, and can we know yet?
I'm not telling you.
I
one,
knew exactly
that
what
one I'm
that
keeping
was
under my
gonna
hat.
be, yeah.
Yeah, so no, that one he is absolutely coming back at some point. So yes, there's an interesting plot point there with that person. I think for us as Twitch streamers as well, that figure also really sparked the chat off, like introducing this hypersexual, mysterious
leather pants
fey
wearing
figure. Yeah, just like everybody's like, what is this person and who are they and why are we not interacting with them? But yeah, there was that whole moment in the sort of the under Fey, if you like, the underdark bit of the Feywild was fantastic, and the shining moment is obviously the deck of many things. But there's important points, because there's an Ioun stone that goes missing as well. You hadn't even identified it. You pull it out. And this goes back to, and we've discussed it on so many Malt, Magic and Moors, but the things that Ander had in his inventory that were magical that he'd not identified. There was a Broom of Flying, there was an Ioun stone, then there was all this other shit. It's just these things that I'm sat there thinking you've barely scratched the surface of some of these items you had, and it's brilliant. Luckily, the one thing that sticks with him is his cloak, and there's a very good reason why that sticks behind.
Yeah.
I will not go into that right now, but there is very, very good reasons. And the same would have happened had Dargon or Kirik picked up that particular card. There's certain items that would have stayed with them for very specific reasons. But that's all part of getting this acorn from the mother tree, returning back to where the Dryad is, and then casting this spell and curing the Mage Blight. And with that done, the task is then, let's go get Vraco. We understand he's in the Feywild too. And all this time there's the whole stuff with Ethereal, which we've not even touched on in the background, around this great mage that appeared while we were in the Ironforge arc, and he's returned periodically, and now he takes us to the Feywild, where he has a presence. And I think the reason we've not touched on him is the fact that we don't know anything about him yet.
No, we don't know anything
Very
about
little
him.
known about Ethereal.
He keeps disappearing, and he's such an he's such a difficult person to talk to. That
he's an arsehole. He's just flat out an arsehole.
Yeah, and that's it. But also, because we made connections whether they're true or not. We were like, did he know the guy who was in the orb down in River's End? Are they all as old as each other? Did they know each other? And I think we learned that they may have done. I can't remember whether that was true or not. But that whole thing about, he's like, yeah. And we also discussed it after maybe one of these episodes, or certainly one of the episodes he was in, going, if you are that old, you probably are just pissed off with everyone, because everyone is a 2-year-old to you, right? So you don't care, and there's no one you can have an intellectual conversation with who follows you. So we as players were going, okay, we can understand why he's just a dick, but also as characters, playing characters, we're like, no, who is he? What is he? Why is he still around? Can he not just get out? Why is he still here? Does he have that sort of guilt, oh, I really should stick around and help? Or is he just pottering about? Is he also helping, but really underlying is causing some havoc? So we've got all of that going through our heads and not quite sure what he is, and he's such an unknown, and I love it.
Absolutely. So there's a few characters like that. I think we're slowly approaching another one who like that as well as we get through these arcs.
If Ethereal starts talking to Zap in here, I wouldn't be surprised, right? It's that like kind of daft thing, but yeah, it's just so interesting. He's like whether he comes back or not.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I suppose because we've not really had any wizards, so to speak. Ethereal as a wizard presents an interesting development, so to speak. That these people who study the art of magic actually exist in this world, rather than gifting it from or being gifted it from gods, fae, or any other power. Sort of even just getting it from the wild magic that seeps through the land. This is somebody who's gone away and studied the scientific nature, which is rare, I think, in our world.
Yeah. That brings in a question which is not necessarily connected to this particular arc, but it was a question that Samal brought up when I think he was wanting to when we were like planning to level up, thinking of leveling up, and he posed the question off camera in our chat, I think, and it was, does Dunamancy exist in Nylin? And I think the answer that we got was, we haven't seen it. Now I'm always interested to know whether therefore it will eventually, whether we've already seen it and not noticed, or whether that's something that some of these wizards or sorcerers in our future may bring, to our heels, and we may realise is another aspect of how wild magic has changed Nylin. And whether Ethereal, in his trying ways of learning the scientific methods of wizardry, will come about that. I know we've talked about, briefly talked about it off camera. I'm very interested to know whether it ever comes a light into the actual campaign.
And I think with the colleges of magic, if you like, or the schools of magic, at the minute, there's absolutely every possibility that all of those could exist, because nobody's explored it yet within our game.
And to be fair, we don't have a wizard to do that, to research that. Otherwise, it may have come up much more. But due to the fact that we've got people who are magic and arcane adjacent, and I suppose that's the question. That's the thing, isn't it? Of all the stuff that we've got, bards have their own magic, and the magic that is given to us by our patrons, so to speak, clerics and warlocks, are celestial powers. They are not, as I understand, the magic, the arcane, that are from that different class of magic. So hence the fact that we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, so I think with wizards, it's very much that it's that scientific nature of understanding of the world around them.
Yeah.
With the other classes, bards to an extent are sort of the wizard class, but it's through music, so they understand the power of music, if you like, and it's taking that to a whole new level. You've then got sorcerers who are just born with stuff innately, like they are touched by the fae, dragons, anything, whatever. And then you've got clerics, paladins, and warlocks to an extent, where it's direct from a source, whether that's the gods, whether that's a force within the world, because let's be fair, a warlock, you could be an archfey, or you could have an archfey patron, you could have a fiend patron, those sorts of things.
Yep.
So there's all these possibilities in the world, and Nylin itself presents a roiling source of magic just because of the way it is. So yeah, there's so much to explore on the magical front, which we've probably not even not even touched the surface yet, to be honest. But bringing it back, because we've digressed massively there, that was awesome.
Yeah, let's bring it back to, we did heal, put Ander into stasis to a degree.
Yeah, so you've got Ander back. He can cast spells. He's sort of moved away from that process. And I suppose we skipped over a whole point, actually, is that as you went back to the Malt Masters previously, Ander had gone and studied at his college. And he'd chosen his college at that point, and we'd leveled up. And then you returned to Moonbright as part of this process, to him then return for a little bit to do some extra training and try and get some information, you doing the whole Champions piece, and now we're in the Feywild trying to cure Ander and also rescue Vraco. And you find this...
And the crew of the Winter's Tale.
Well, and this is the point now. So you now find this town of Eladrin, which in itself is Yeah, but also confirmed something that you'd been thinking and sort of questioning as players rather than as characters for a very long time. Is the Feywild, or is Feyliad, where the Eladrin comes from?
Yeah.
And the question is finally answered as yes, this is where he came from, but he is no longer welcome there. He's totally corrupted by whatever force has corrupted him. And he has left some scars within that town, within that city. So you are led from this city to go and rescue Reiko, and you sort of make your way through the Feywild with a couple of guides. Otherwise, that could have been total fun for me because there's so many Fey creatures that totally could have screwed you over, and you did almost encounter a couple of them, but we won't go into that in too much detail.
There was some good stealth rolls when we laid down. Yeah,
there was a lot of good stealth rolls. But you find Reiko, but not Reiko anymore. It is this vampiric thrall, and he just attacks you on sight. He's been imprisoned in an iron cage on this island in the middle of a river.
That was
and
the
your only choice at the end of the day
for Dargon, and such
Absolutely.
an emotional, roller coaster for him. But his fighter and Goliath honor stood out, that he would never let a friend carry another minute in what he knew was his worst nightmare.
Absolutely.
And Reiko being turned was his worst nightmare. So.
But it also introduced the concept of true death, finally. And Reiko... let's be fair, we introduced both Johannes and Reiko as sort of party boosters right back in the beginning, where we'd gone from having a playing group of around 6 or 7 down to just yourself and Danny.
Yeah.
And so to make it... because playing with 2 is very difficult, to make it a little bit easier for yourselves, but also introduce the chance to experiment with some of the classes. I gifted you 2 player characters that I'd created, and you sort of played 2 player characters at the same time, but keeping Dargon and Ander as your main, and sort of having these 2 sidekicks, if you like. So I think because Reiko had been in the story near enough from the start, for Reiko to then meet his end at your hands, very specifically Dargon's hands, there was a weight to it, and a significant weight to it, that really rocked the whole group momentarily.
It also once again pointed Dargon in a further direction. He completely let go of his arcane magic that he had learnt up till then, and completely just shunned it, the whole thing. Knowing that it had utterly failed him, and that he'd been taught it to a degree by Reiko, or at least given that understanding that someone can be just more than a fighter, they can be an arcane fighter. Albeit obviously Reiko was again celestial fighter to a degree, as in he had that sort of cleric abilities.
Well, he was a cleric, so
yes. But that was the thing, so he didn't directly learn the arcane understanding of that, but Dargon had learnt that this magic could help his fighting. As a result, shunned the lot, and there was even some times in the following episodes when he could have done stuff and didn't, and it was just really heartbreaking for him that had to happen. It also meant that there was one particular moment he did not enter the city afterwards, and has also shunned a number of large locations, or has at the very least not wanted to, and that was that it brought out his insecurities, probably the wrong word, but one of the vulnerabilities that he has due to the fact that he has lycanthropy. He does not want to be in large spaces with large crowds of people.
Absolutely, and that it's really playing on that element of the werebear society now. And it's something we've not explored yet, is also how Dargon contracted lycanthropy is itself a rare thing, because werebears actually only do it in certain situations, whereas the werebears you encountered seem to be a lot more feral. So it's something we probably will explore going forward. But yes, absolutely, in this moment, that werebear introvert type nature is overtaking. Dargon's lost arguably one of the closest friends he's had. Vraco helped Dargon through Dargon special one-shot, which we did as just yourselves and I, sort of before the pandemic even hit, when we were still just getting into the realms of D&D.
Yep.
And Vraco was there as your sort of guiding light through that. So to have Vraco die, as I say, really is a turning point in the story.
Yeah.
Because it also, I think, had a knock-on effect in Kirik, and the fact that Vraco became the undead. Kirik now has openly expressed that's one of his fears, at least to himself and to the Raven Queen. So it's really
he saw
cemented this fundamental feeling of death.
Yeah, he saw that a cleric could become the one thing that all clerics fight against. And his vulnerability came from... Kirik was this... I wouldn't say cocksure by any means, but he was... Because he had a very literature background. But in that sense, he had this assurity that clerics are always on that side and can never be corrupted. To see someone he knew, a close friend, and a very powerful cleric turn into the one thing he hated really did shake Kirik, and we saw that a lot. Yeah,
absolutely. And I suppose then the hits keep coming as you, as a party, decide to you retrace your steps, but you enter into the ruined part of the city, which you understand is ruined because of the Dark Eladrin and his actions.
Yep.
And enter into this huge, great ziggurat-like temple, finding this pierced or this impaled body on a sword, and this huge, great anti-magic field that is just around this temple. So you go in there knowing that you've got no magical abilities whatsoever to use. No magic is going to work in here.
I was about to say, apart from the fact that we know that Kirik actually dispelled that before we even knew that. We did not know that was going to be the case.
Yes, he did.
So, yeah, that was my question.
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, we thoroughly understood that we would end up going in there, and obviously were worried with everything that happened with Ander stuff. Were we going to basically lose all of our stuff? With a unbelievable roll from Samal, we never had to find that out, but fuck me, we probably should have.
Well, and this is the thing, that destruction of that anti-magic field meant you got into the temple and could explore it, but then there's that moment of you've truly unleashed hell, because the minute that one of you touches the sword, which I believe is Kirik actually in that moment, he goes to lift the sword, that is like a homing beacon. And the Dark Eladrin arrives, but the Dark Eladrin arrives with help.
Yes.
And there is this flaming knight-like character who enters into the temple at the same time. And it's the hardest battle you guys have encountered yet. It's the hardest battle you've had to go through. In the fact that Bothrid wasn't there, he'd remained with the villagers of Greenflower, who had managed to escape, thanks to Grellan. And was also there with the crew of the Winter's Tale, who had, as part of that wild magic storm, they had been teleported into the Feywild, which is why Vraco was there in the first place. You'd also understand that, I forget his name now because he's dead, and he's literally dead to me now, but one of the crew of the Winter's Tale had also perished as part of that encounter at Vraco's hands. So that all played into this whole story with Vraco. But here we are in the middle of this temple now with the guy who has plagued us and followed us for so long. It was Mover, thank you. Plagued us for so long, and now it is literally the fight to the finish. Like, only one party's walking out of here.
Yep.
And it gets to the moment where Dargon and Kirik are gone. They're dead. Not just dead, but all saving throws gone dead.
Yep.
And it's just Ander, the Eladrin, and this... I can't remember whether it's a Death Knight or a Death Tyrant that I used at the time.
Death Knight, I
slightly
believe
homebrewed
you
them as
used.
well.
And... Yeah. Yes, you're right. Both of them were still alive, but fucking running, because...
Well, the Eladrin specifically was running.
Yeah, but the
Eladrin was on his arse.
Wish is use this last wish to rebuild that anti-magic field.
That's where we were getting to, yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's one of the reasons why Dargon and Kirik went down at the end of the day. Not only did it save the party, but also killed part of the party. It saved you guys in the long run, but it also was the worst thing that could have happened. So yeah, with that anti-magic field back up, the only thing that Anders got is his bow. And the bow that's sort of been gifted to him by people of the Fae. So there is a bit of added power being in the Feywild, and he's just in this blind rage. And if we go right back and you look at the other introduction to the campaign, we talk about how Anders' family is actually murdered by an Eladrin. It turns out to be the Dark Eladrin, who then adopts him and raises him. And then Johannes takes over that role, but takes him away from the Dark Eladrin. And the Dark Eladrin comes back into the fold through our campaign. So Anders, in this moment of closure and rage, and Ethereal does come charging through and get something of a killing blow on Theogodin, but then Ander plants the perfect arrow through not just the knight, but also the Eladrin as well. And in that moment, both of those die, and it closed a chapter in our campaign. The Eladrin is dead, but what sent him now? And this is the question now of, we know now he was a lackey, we know now he was a servant to something. There is something bigger and badder than the Eladrin.
We started to theorise that. I can't fully remember when, but it had been quite a while before that we were like, I wonder.
Well, there's a lot of dream sequences that have happened.
Yes. Yeah, because there's dream sequences.
There's dream sequences that have happened. And you've had some shared dream sequences, you've had some individual dream sequences. And every DM will know that dream sequences are a great way to sort of drop lore and plot points and those sorts of things. But yeah, so this is a chapter that closes. And even though we've had this various arcs, you could almost call this the ultimate arc, overarching arc, if you like, to use arc 1,000 times in a sentence, of the Eladrin. And that whole piece around, you've had this enemy constantly going at you that could have been the bad guy, the big bad, at the end of all things, but is not. You defeat him. And at the same time, we then get this moment now. We've got to get out of the Feywild with two of our party truly dead.
Yeah.
Like, all death saving throws gone, dead. How do we bring them back? So Ethereal sort of helps you get everybody back to the Maltmasters Guild, and this is where we have this moment where the Raven Queen steps in, and we explore death for the first time. And I get to bring in a concept from one of our favourite book series,
do you know,
which is,
as I said,
the Old Kingdom.
Yeah, I immediately knew what you were doing, and I was overwhelmed with excitement about it because, you know, I actually knew that the other two guys were just loving the story, but I was just living in one of the adventures that we had both, you know, read as kids, and again more recently. I know that I you know, read it more recently, and I was just, I absolutely loved it.
Absolutely, and I've reread them recently as well, and I'm actually looking forward to the new book coming out hopefully at the end of this year, which is all about Sabriel's father. So the book is the Old Kingdom series, because it's not even a trilogy now. It was originally a trilogy, which was Sabriel, Lyriel, and the Abhorsen. But there's this whole concept of death tying into sort of Dante's Inferno and sort of the nine circles of hell, but having the 9 precincts of death. And I've pretty much stolen that concept. So sorry, Garth, I've nicked it. And it's been great for our game, but you're welcome to join us at any time, whenever, and play through your own concept. But it was great because it's Kirik now in this world where the Raven Queen rules. This is her domain.
Yeah.
And he is a servant of the Raven Queen. She sets him a task, and you're introduced to this wacky wizard character. So the second or third wizard, I suppose we could say, we'd encountered, which is our guest star Paul, who did a fantastic job, I might add. I'm hoping he'll come back in the future. But trapped in this world, and you get Vraco back. For the briefest moment, you get Vraco back to explore this concept with. And and the task is to go and prevent this thing coming back from one of the deeper precincts of death, which, if it broke into life, presents a serious problem, and goes against the nature of things and the order of things. And all the while through the campaign, the Raven Queen has been saying to Kirik, protect the veil, guard the veil. And I think in this moment he finally understands that that is the veil between life and death, and make sure you're maintaining the balance. And so all this occurs, and you defeat the big bad, but then at the same moment you find the Eladrin
Yeah.
trying and clinging on to the last hopes and vestments of life that they could potentially have. And Kirik uses that moment to just get fucked. Just get on with it.
What was
so
was the creature trying to get out the same Death Knight? I think that we were describing that. I think we thought it was the same.
Yes,
one.
It was,
and it was so incredible. It was so incredible that essentially we thought that, and again we could have had this wrong, but that was a servant to Theogodon, and yet was weirdly more, well, I suppose it's not a really surprise, but was more powerful in death than Theogodon was, because it was still its own entity, whereas we saw that the moment Theogodon died, he lost the will of his patron, and therefore, as you said, when we met him in death, he was a level 5 rogue, right? And therefore was
just level 5 rogue.
Just, again, compared to a level 11 at that time, 11, 12, 12 grave cleric was obliterated.
Oh, he was sent beyond the 9 precinct and well into true death.
Yeah.
The final death, would you like? So yeah, but there's this whole arc which for me I think is cemented Kirik's place in the world.
Yeah.
But it also gives you that moment of closure against the Eladrin, and then as you come back with that opportunity to return to life with the stuff that Ander and Ethereal and the Malt Masters are doing back in Glen Tuag, that moment of saying goodbye to Vraco.
Yeah.
And having the option of him come back or to finally join his god, and the Raven Queen actually opens the doorway direct to the planes of, or the realm of Cord, and allows him to just pass beyond. But in this moment, Kirik gets that awesome ability now to be able to step into death, and emerge anywhere where you know somebody has died. But the older the death is, the implications that has as to how you have to traverse through death. So that as a mechanic, I'm kind of just made up as a thing, and Simel's made it awesome.
I was about to say, I think it may have even been that in the original description it was you have to simply enter death and then you'll get out anywhere. He took it as I need to go and find him, and it was further away and so on and so forth. So when he then did this epic move, he went all the way down to the 9th level. As he got back, which was truly awesome when he did.
So yeah, it's presented a really awesome notion, and we're almost up to date now. I think with this, we've sort of, once we do that, we get back to the Malt Masters. Anders healed. Vraco's returned to an extent, and we do have that whole moment where we take Vraco back to Moonbright, which we'll get to shortly. But as I say, the chapter is closed, and we are almost at a point now where the choice is yours as players. What do you want to do next? So the first thing is, as Dargon, we need to return Vraco. Yeah. But then it's, where are we going from here?
Yes.
So there's that whole concept, that whole sequence where we return Vraco to Moonbright, and there's the funeral, and that in itself is a very emotional, powerful moment.
Just before that, because we only intimated it in the start of this, and that was, before that even happened, Kirik realised that he had this new ability and immediately acted upon his issue, and that was that Green Flower was still an issue, and he returned as the cleric nuke that he is, and completely obliterated every single, as far as we're aware, dead, thing that was there in mere minutes. and just was astonishing how he used the grave cleric abilities to such a wonderful level. He did miss something that is gonna. I say come back to bite us in the ass. I mean that in such a good way. Where I'm looking forward to realizing what we have missed since episode 1. Right, I cannot wait, and I think that's just truly wonderful. It also made for a bit of hilarity when he came back, told us we finally, as characters, realised that Kirik had been knocked off his pedestal in his own mind. That he had become, he suddenly had this, I'm not as secure as I thought. And also the fact that when we then left for Moonbright, we kept a close eye on him, going, where the hell are you going? What are you doing? Hang on a minute. Wait, stay there. Don't go out without this. And we suddenly were like, almost like he had an issue and we were trying to help him. And that was such a interesting dynamic came upon that.
Absolutely right. And you're right. It's all part of this chapter being closed, if you like, was Kirik taking us straight back to episode 1 of the streaming, which is ridiculous, and cleansing Greenflower. There is that thing that he missed, which is probably a fundamental thing. Let's be fair, it's a very fundamental to the story of Greenflower. The thing that he's missed because his perception roll was shite, which is uncanny for sort of like unheard of for Kirik, to be honest. So yes, there is that moment again of just pure brilliance, and taking the mechanics I build and twisting them in ways that I would never have thought of. And then we go back to Moonbright. We have that emotional moment. We have that whole powerful sequence of we are saying goodbye to Vraco, but everybody is saying goodbye to Vraco. The Malt Masters go down. The Witchwoods go down, who Dargon has a connection to, and we've not explored them yet in any great detail, but we will. Don't hesitate there, or don't worry about that one. Johannes we've not really experimented with, explored too much yet, but it shows you that actually Vraco,
the fact that the Malt Masters started to mend bridges on the fact that we told them they should, really started to show where we were on a level with them, and as a player I never expected that. You know what I mean? Like, in the mechanics of D&D, let's say we thought they were level 20. They probably are. They're level 20. Eventually we're going to get to level 20. I say that, but let's just assume that we did. We would be on a level with them. But I never thought that would actually happen when we were only level 12 or 13, showing that the levels that you have, the power that you have, is meaningless in the terms of actually you can still be on the level with someone, and we realised we were. And again, in no cocksure way, just simply going, oh, right, this is how this works.
Yeah, so in terms of the narrative, absolutely, the Malt Masters have begun to realise that they've got this power, but they've probably not been using it in the way they should be, and actually they've been neglecting the world that they are trying to protect, so to speak. And in this moment of losing someone who has been such a help to them, that brings gravity to their situation as well. There's then the whole stuff that happens with the Stillman not long after this.
Yes.
Or in fact during this, the Stillman's gone, the blade is gone.
Yep.
There has been dead bodies found within Glen Tuag, devoid of blood, basically totally drained of their blood, and vampire Stillman, you figure out it's the Stillman at the end of the time. So there's all this going on. And then the Serpent's Cloak enters back into it as well, while all this is going on at the same time. And it has those brief skirmishes with the Serpent's Cloak, and the name is finally revealed. And we almost potentially go down another rabbit hole with that whole sequence around, okay, that this exists, and we're potentially going to explore that avenue. And we haven't yet, but I think that is probably getting to that stage. And of course, we get a name for the group. We have entered into death. We have gone through all of this process. We've closed this chapter, and it is the perfect moment for me. to watch you guys then come out with this name in conversation. I think it's in conversation with the Malt Masters, actually. You're discussing around the fact that you are now the Wardens of the Vale, and you are going your own way. You are no longer just lieutenants of the Malt Masters Guild. You are your own entity now, and you're out there as a force for good in Nylin. A force for hopefully good in Nylin, at least. And then comes the question of what next. And you as a group back in Glen Tuag decide we need to head north, we need to go to Shiverspire. And that kind of brings us up to date now.
I would just say that Arc 1 in Ironforge, we twigged that we were told that the prophecy was held in certain locations. We were told about the 3 thrones and the 3 areas of the kingdom of Nylin. And we had, on the way back from Ironforge, gone, we need to go to these other places. And our always destination was Shiverspire. And it took us until now, over a year later, to finally get back there. And so that was what finally brought us to that's why we're going. And interestingly, before we even went to go and get Vraco, half the party were like, fuck it, let's not go, let's go north. And it kept cropping up. To finally get there, and we haven't even got there yet, is absolutely brilliant. And that's where we're heading.
And it's absolutely, and it's been one hell of a journey.
Yeah.
And to be fair, just the journey to Shiverspire itself has been a journey.
Yeah.
Has been epic, and introduced 2 new characters to the whole sequence of and the whole myriad of characters we've got. But that moment, and I think there's been other hints dropped during this arc, if you like, around maybe places you should or should not visit. Places that you may not be ready to go, places that are important to whatever you're trying to achieve. But it's the first time as a party you were really given I just left you with, what are you doing now? Where are you going? Without hints or plot drops or those sorts of things. So you've chosen to go to Shiverspire, and rather than go the route which I presented as potentially an easy route, you've taken the hard road, to be brutally honest. It's the shortest road, but it's a hard road.
But that's what I loved about it, was I knew as a player that you were guiding us one way. I knew that my character, wouldn't do that, right? And I even spoke about it possibly in the game itself, as well as also in Malt Magic and More. Dargon is a mountain-born Goliath. He is going to be happy to walk up those mountains. And he gave the choice to the other guys, and Ander didn't have an issue, and Kirik went, you're right, it's the right way to go. And so we went. And I love that. I believe that I saw, Matt, your DMing skills really come into their own, going, I didn't expect that. And just pulled us, to, right, well, you've decided you're going that way. Here are the challenges ahead of you. To which we have, we fought, a group of people that we shouldn't have been able to beat, that we were discouraged against. We have fought, some creatures who were incredible. We have avoided, but I kind of wish we hadn't, a massive, was it a troll or a giant? I can't remember, but it was
a giant.
It was yeah, and I'm like, I so wish that we could go and meet him and so on. All of that has been absolutely wonderful, and then obviously to get ourselves down through the mountains and to the godforsaken place we just went through was really good fun, and I think we all thoroughly enjoyed it. And of course, everyone needs to catch up with the last few episodes to see the mic drop that happened in last episode. It was just awesome.
Absolutely. So because part of the reason for going north, let's not forget, is the fact that Moonbright falls. At the end of that funeral, Moonbright is totally demolished.
Yes.
Fiends descend on it, devils descend on it. And
the Malt Masters stay to try and do what they can.
Well, everybody just gets pulled apart.
Yeah.
Where everybody is together in this moment of sorrow and unification and sort of fundamental understanding as a group and saying goodbye to a friend, then this chaos descends and everybody's just pulled in various directions and having to fight various creatures, and you're basically told, just go do what you've got to do. You're the important ones now. Go and get on with it. So you retreat back without the Malt Masters to the Malt Masters Keep and have to deal with that situation and sort of putting people in charge. And actually, I think you put Mephisto in charge at one point. Mephisto does take that on the chin and sort of runs with it. But he's a shopkeeper at the end of the day. And then you head up north, and there's encounters with Cyclops. There's the Beholder encounter, which is a fantastic moment as well, when that just appears around the corner on the map. I've loved those reactions. And then we've got this whole Hobgoblin Goblin warband piece where you meet the characters of Remley and Gindris, or Gremley or Rindris, depending on which player character you're talking to. So it is Remley and Gindris, I should say. And they've been so mysterious throughout this whole last sequence. And this last sort of plot arc, and then we've got to this point where we've gone through the Shiverspire mine that was being basically held open by these Mind Flayer overlords who were searching for something that you still don't know what they were searching for yet. And you've had these dream sequences around this orb type thing, very similar in some ways to what you've experienced with the Soul Sphere.
Yep.
But supposedly underneath Shiverspire, and that's where also there is these sort of pinpoints of light on the map that you are shown as part of this dream sequence. And we've got to the stage where we've defeated the overlords, we've used the 3 keys that we had together to smash through this portal basically, and now we've appeared in this area, and there is the bomb drop of a final moment in an episode, which I will not spoil, and I am going to say go watch episode 62. Now that you've caught up on the rest of the campaign, watch episode 62, or maybe watch the last few episodes to understand the Shiverspire mine arc, and get to this point, because we are going to explore it next week ultimately, and I don't want to spoil anything as part of this recap, but it is another fantastic moment, nothing to do with me. And I take great pleasure in these fantastic moments that happen throughout the campaign being absolutely bugger all to do with me as a DM. I just create the sandbox for you guys to play in, and I love watching you guys play in it. And for me, I think, yes, we're in a mid-campaign recap and it's all about the story and it's all about what you guys have gone through, but for me as a DM, it's just been an absolute pleasure playing this game with the 3 of you and our extended family and the guests we've had and the sort of the chat we've been having over the last few weeks. It's been such a break, and we started this because of COVID. Let's not lie. We started these live streams and getting back together because of COVID and the isolation that everybody was feeling, and we've just created this community around ourselves. We've not got a massive amount of fans, and we would love more, but the fans that we've got have been with us throughout this whole journey. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to seeing where this goes now.
Yeah, I mean, we all play on a Monday because we want to play. And whether it be to the viewers that we have or no viewers at all, because we love it. However, having those viewers there has truly meant that we want to honour that story for ourselves and for them as well, and really has brought out the fact that we don't just have DOS weeks where we're like, I don't really care. Every week I care what happens to this story, and I care to every NPC and every player character. And I just want to know every detail as we roll through, and it's just absolutely, the high point of every week. It's just great fun.
Absolutely, and it's long may it continue, is all
Absolutely.
I can say.
Yes. Hopefully,
so I suppose
we may even over time try and get an in-person, sort of session going. But hopefully we'll
absolutely.
I
think now the restrictions the restrictions in the UK are now getting to a point where I think we can start to explore it in a lot more detail. And there's a few other things that we've obviously been talking about as a group that we would like to do. So please watch this space. But I think ultimately, thank you all for watching and joining us on the journey. Thank you to my players. So it is Malt and Magic. I am going to raise a whiskey to everyone that's been following us along, to my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful players. We are not done yet. So I'm going to take a sip of this. And we are going to close this recap. Yeah, it's been amazing to go back over all this. And initially I was planning to be honest, to just do this as another YouTube video or another just quick recorded video that I did for the very, very beginning of the stream, just to get people up to speed. I think it was actually Dave who said, let's do this as a chat show. So when things occurred tonight where we're just totally beyond our control, very quickly this became an ultimate option. So I'm so glad we've had the opportunity to do this. I do wish we'd been able to chat with the other guys as well, but it has just been amazing, amazing, amazing so far to get where we are. And to be totally honest, I would have not got here without the support of the players that we have, and obviously the support of you guys following us along as well. So please, 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 if you're enjoying this so far and you're not already following along, please follow us on Twitch. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please subscribe to the podcast. You're only missing out, to be honest. You've heard some of the key elements and the fantastic stories that we've gone through. There will be no Malt, Magic and More this week, obviously, because we have done this full recap and we are missing a few people. But we will be back in anger next week to do episode 63 to deal with that bombshell that was dropped and see where things go. But again, from me, a very, very heartfelt thank you. It's been an emotional roller coaster so far, and I hope to see and hear and experience more of it. So until next week, stay safe. We love you all, and we will see you then.